Hey. Okay, so welcome to another Madness and Mayhem. Just gonna open the chat just so I can drop some links, perhaps. Okay, so we've got another very controversial show today. Loads of things going on, but I wanted to just start by sharing something that's only recently kind of cropped up. So just hold on, let me get myself sorted. So what we're going to go through today is Jesus was a pedo. Okay. Epstein didn't kill himself or have a list. Did that happen a couple of hours ago? And then remembering the 7/7 hoax. And we went through the 7/7 hoax, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, when I had my other channel before it got nuked, but I think it's fitting to kind of revisit again today, and then effortlessly breaking through overwhelm. So I'll leave you on a high with how to kind of get past the overwhelm and enable you to kind of move forward, which is what we all want, desire and need, right? We all want to have less overwhelm in our lives and far more ease. Okay, so first up, I just want to share something, like I said, that's literally drives my crackers when I say like literally has actually just shown up. Right, so let me just get it, pause it. I'm going to make it bigger. Not that big, because then I can't see what's going on. Maybe I'm going to have to make it big in a minute. Right, let me share the oh, I know what I can do. Hold on. Right. So I want you to be able to see it. I don't want it like midget sized. Right. Share screen. Oh. Oh, maybe it's a window. Yeah, there we go. It's on a window. What can you see? Okay, you can see it. That's cool. I just wanted to make sure you could see it before I hit play. Hey, Chris. And can you hear the sound? This is sometimes where we go wrong, isn't it? You can't always hear the sound. You're just gonna have to hear it through the microphone, and I will do my best to stay quiet. Let me just turn it up a bit first. So apologies if this then sounds really, really loud or echoey or okay, so let me turn the microphone off and see whether you can. Okay, that was a really choice place to stop it. Can I just can you hear that or not? Do I have to have the microphone on? I don't know how to oh no, wait a minute. Yeah, maybe you can. Okay, I'm going to carry her on. Otherwise, it's not the word. Okay, there isn't any sound. Thanks. Okay. So, I mean, the sound's kind of important. I need to get it connected up to OBS again, because then I can play videos and not have to deal with this crap. Okay, so it's only like a minute and something long, right? We're going to hit play and see what she says. Oh, wait a minute, maybe. Oh, okay. Now I can't see you guys. There we go. Okay, so hopefully you had sound, but the sound wasn't necessarily the important thing. And I'm not sure whether you could have seen it all properly. But actually, the thing that was so obvious when I was watching it was the fact that her eyes don't move at all. Right, we've got this fake outrage, and even when she's talking to the guest, her eyes are permanently above the screen. Right, she's looking directly at what she's reading. So nobody has an emotional rant that coherently ever. You don't. So if you've ever seen oh, well, that was interesting, wasn't it? How I kind of got kicked off for a second. What was I saying? Okay, if you've ever seen the documentary that she did, it was awkward and painful to watch because she had no camera presence at all. I mean, it was really, really awkward to watch, and it was about rape, but not just. It wasn't specifically about the grooming gangs. It was just about rape, women being raped in general, not just in the UK. She kind of went into some really good statistics, and it's a shame. It was a really interesting documentary, but she wasn't the best person to I mean, I think it was supposedly her work, right? But it wasn't a pleasurable viewing, right? So it wasn't somebody that you would be like, oh yeah, I really, really enjoyed that documentary, the way that they presented it. It was just awkward from start to finish, right? No camera presence at all whatsoever. So contrast that with the heightened emotion, well timed and placed finger pointing and hand slaps. I want you to think back to the last time that you were incensed by something and you were telling somebody how frustrated you were by what was going on, and whether you were as coherent, whether you were able to capture everything you wanted to say in 90 seconds, whether you were also able to do it without umming, ahhing, like any kind of actual thought process. And also whether you were able to make sure that your hands were kind of doing the exact same thing. So I don't say I have to, but I do reels, and sometimes they're scripted, right? And in order to get them scripted and sounding unscripted, the way that you do it is you practice multiple times. And actually the easiest way, so you can edit shit, but I don't edit because it just takes me a really long time. So instead I will write a 90-second reel, and I will run it through using the teleprompter until I can run it through and it sounds natural, and my hands are in all the right kind of places. And it's very obvious that that's not off the cuff, right? As best as possible, it's not off the cuff. It's exactly what I saw when I saw that 90 seconds worth of outrage about whatever's happened with Sadiq Khan. I'm refusing today. I was saying to Matt earlier, is that I'm refusing to talk about Starmer, Labour, Khan, civil war, any of that bullshit, because I'm bored of talking about it because it's just the same old bullshit. However, if you get an opportunity to watch that link, zoom in, right? If you can, watch her eyes. That's how you can tell whether people are being genuine or not. Obviously, like, I'm looking at the camera because I'm talking to you and looking at you. But I'm not, I'm definitely not reading anything. I don't have the time or the energy to read anything. But I absolutely, if I was like looking at somebody, like say like I had a guest, I wouldn't be like this, right? Nobody does that naturally. And every single piece of body language was expertly timed to give the correct emphasis, and that doesn't happen naturally. It really doesn't. So that's my 10 cents on that, if you've seen that clip, by the way. And I urge you to watch her documentary, right? Go and watch her rape documentary, because then you will see just how animated she was in those 90s. So the animation, the perfect hand movements, the perfect body language, the perfect amount of outrage, without slipping. Okay, so without slipping up, right? Okay, so remember a few weeks ago I mentioned Katie Hopkins' Freudian slip, right? Because this is the most outrageous Freudian slip I've heard. Doesn't mean it is the most outrageous, but the most outrageous Freudian slip I've heard, by somebody in the limelight, was when she compared herself to Andrew Tate and to Tommy Robinson, and then got even more angry when she was called on it, right? So there's no way I would be able to give some outrageous 90-second speech without swearing, right? I challenge any one of you to come up with a 90-second off the cuff like being outraged thing, right? Being completely coherent, having all of your hands and everything in the right place. And when you're thinking about the horrific things that are going on, to be able to do that without having to stop yourself from swearing, because maybe you know that you're online, you're live, or letting it slip. And I wouldn't stop myself. I mean, because that's why I have my own platform. But if you use swear words in just normal everyday language, remember the key point about Katie Hopkins' Freudian slip that I mentioned is when we are in a state of anger, right? Any kind of negative emotions, we are in our kind of like primal state, right? It's your survival state, right? Your prefrontal cortex isn't working effectively. Your capacity to think long term about what you should be doing next, the decision making, saying the right things, hitting the tonality perfectly, not stepping, putting your foot in it. None of those things are actually engaged. The only thing that's engaged is getting you out of the shitstorm that you've potentially stepped in. And when we're angry, that's heightened, right? So the capacity to actually think coherently is diminished if it's genuine anger, right? So I'm not saying she's not angry. I'm not saying she's not upset. I'm not saying, I don't know her, but what I'm saying is that was scripted, and that's what pissed me off. Right? Because people shouldn't have to script their outrage at the way that people are being treated, at all. You don't need to write a script in order to express how pissed off you are with the way that people are being treated, particularly when it comes to children being raped, experimented on, trafficked, organ harvested, any of the completely horrific things that are going on. You shouldn't need to script it at all. So, but also, you don't get to be on TV if you're, free. And I'm not saying these people weren't free, but as soon as they got a contract, they've signed a contract with an organization which is allowed to be on TV, which people are allowed to access. That should tell you everything that you need to know straight away, right? I managed to get up to 10,000 people on my YouTube channel, and then it was taken, right? You saw a minute ago I got off the internet. Even right now, right? Even now that I've restarted my show, and there's 8 people here live, right? I cannot make my show available to anyone other than me while it's live on Facebook. I'm quite literally locked from doing it. When I try to hover over the padlock to click the button to change who gets to see it, a red circle comes up with a line through it. Once it's so sometimes once it's finished, sometimes I'm then allowed to change it, right? So I want you to really consider the reality of the people who are on the TV. right? Because this is anybody can access TV. This isn't like a podcast, and there are podcasters who will not say things because they are worried about losing their channels and stuff like that. I mean, I said the only thing I won't say is the name of that AI, right? That's it. Like everything else, I don't censor, but I I mean, I think rogue AI can just stay in the background. I don't need rogue AI on me, right? That's a decision to not have everything completely kiboshed. But I will say rape. I will say trafficking. I will say torture. I will say murder. I will say I think it's disgusting that people censor these things, right? Either you have the balls to stand up and say the real fucking words, or you get back in your lane and you allow somebody else who's going to say those things. Because if everybody says those things, then they cannot censor it, right? If you are censoring yourself, then you should not be listened to, in my opinion, right? It drives me fucking crackers as well when you're trying to watch something where they've got a really decent guest on, and then you're trying to watch it and it's like silent, 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 or beep, 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 beep. And I'm thinking, well, just don't have that guest on. Don't have them on. Like it just. And I have never been. Okay, so why did I lose my YouTube channel? It's because I was talking about brainwashing. Because I was telling everybody exactly how they were brainwashing the kids, and using actual science, using psychology, using the information that has been out there since early 1900s, right? That's what I was doing, and I was explaining how it was being done in the classroom. I was explaining how it was being done. And I didn't mention the Rona, so these weren't anything to do with the Rona. They weren't anything to do with all of the I mean they were, but I didn't mention Rona. I didn't mention like Sage or any of those institutions. I did it very there was three it was like three very specific parts about brainwashing. As a psychologist, I was giving my professional opinion on how it was being done, and linking it back to legitimate scientific research sources. And I initially got a strike and removed because we were talking about the Shadowgate documentary. Then I got my channel back, and then I got 2 retroactive strikes. The first one was on brainwashing number 1. The second one was on brainwashing number 2. The third one was on brainwashing number 2. And then they had to give it me back. I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden, 18 months later, I was allowed it again. And then literally within an hour of allowing it, they striked me forever for brainwashing number 3. Right. And they'd all been up for... They were like the earliest videos I did. Right. So that's why when I did like 4.5 hours worth of brainwashing, I did it like private, right? Because I didn't want the information to be taken away again. But I shared it all, right? It's not like it was secret. But I just didn't do it on YouTube. But it wasn't because I was saying the word rape, wasn't because I was saying the word torture, wasn't because I was saying any of those things. And if we are silenced because of that, then what about the Hollywood films, right? I just tag my stuff on YouTube saying it's not made for kids, right? It's not made for kids, does have foul language, and they can do that, right? These podcasters can do that. GB News could have it. What is it after the? Is there even a watershed anymore? I don't even know if there is a watershed. Who knows? Anyway, I've got completely off topic. As happens, my apologies. The Epstein thing won't take long because I mean, there we are. There is no. That's what we get next. There is no Epstein, right? That's what's coming. There's no Epstein. So Epstein, supposedly, according to the Department of Justice, is that what it's called, or is that the UK one? I think that's the UK one, isn't it? Department of Justice. I don't know. the Epstein, there's 11 hours worth of footage considering there were no cameras working beforehand. He killed himself. Nobody killed him. And then he doesn't have a list, right? So then that begs the question, who was Ghislaine trafficking to? Also begs the question, who was on and off his flight logs, right? Who was going to and from his little island? Who was going to and from his Mexico ranch, right? So what was he doing in and out of the UK RAF bases, landing on RAF bases, going and seeing the Queen, going and seeing Prince Andrew, hopping across to Wales and hopping across to Ireland, and then hopping all the way back to America with 2 little kids for Justice John Roberts, if I remember correctly. No, it was 5 years ago. The 2 little Irish twins that that were smuggled out of the UK via Epstein. I mean, that they don't count either. So this is the most ludicrous thing in the world. And the fact that anybody thought Kash Patel was a good person, and then when they hired Dan Bongino, and you thought shame on you, right? Shame on you. So why didn't I think Kash Patel was a good person? Because I saw what he was actually doing with regards to the election stuff, right? Getting people to go and canvass voters after the fact. Like, what? I know what did he do? He got mobile phone data, didn't he? That's what he did. He went and got mobile phone data. But do you remember? Okay, so 2020, do you remember? Like, there was shitloads of fucking evidence of mobile phone videos of people being ejected from polling, people putting their things in the machines and then their vote saying something different. So there was like stupid amounts of evidence that was like eyewitness evidence caught on camera. We had the whole fucking suitcase stuff. So anybody who was going against the grain, which with regards to, we should be getting hold of the actual source code of the fucking machines. But also there was the report done by, I cited it in the thing that I submitted to the UK terrorism thing. He ended up going to prison. I can't remember his name. He did a report on the election interference. And so the reason why I cited it in the thing that I kind of, the 52-page thing that I submitted, was because, and in there, so I broke down Sadiq Khan had, it was, oh shit, what's the word? Like election fraud in London mayoral election, right? Because I used Tor's affidavit, and also this report which looked at different things that were submitted, and basically proved who was doing what things. And I also used Mike Lindell's thing. So there was 3 full reports that I used and I cited, and I proved that the same things happened in Sadiq Khan's mayoral election. But also it was cited because there were people in the United Kingdom who were flipping votes, who was hooked up, right? So they'd tracked IP addresses to the United Kingdom. So, very dodgy, actual election interference by the UK. And nobody talks about that specific thing that was in that report. I have to find that fucking report. Oh my gosh, that poor guy. He went to prison. It's because I was not planning on talking about this that I absolutely, definitely can't remember names. Right, here we go. Let me just... Right, terrorism in the UK, 18th of the 7th, 2021. Oh my God, that's like quite a few years ago. It was such a long time ago. Oh, yeah, we all had all the see, look at all the stuff that I did. Like, people are doing this shit now, right? They're saying this stuff now. This has also got stuff in here with regards to Epstein knowing. Yeah, this has got Epstein stuff in there with regards to I'd uncovered specific RAF bases that he was landing at, under the radar, and landing at after he'd already been arrested and convicted of child being a pedo, and then was visiting the king and queen, right? So, I mean, I'm happy to share this link again. Let me just find that guy's name because I feel really bad for him because he went to prison. It's got all the links. It's got all the. Oh my gosh, this is all stuff from 2020 that people are only just talking about now, like it's brand new. It's really depressing. Sorry, it's like 60 pages of stuff. I'll share it in a sec. For those of you who are on Twitter, I will have to go to Twitter and drop it. Oh, it's got all about the organized riots, media. I mean, it's a pretty good proof of how they were trying to kill us all. Right, where's the stuff on? Oh, Jimmy Savile, there he is as well. Oh shit. Oh, here we go. London mayoral elections. I could have shared the screen, couldn't I? Sorry, guys. Oh, that was annoying. Here we go. Electronic voting audit. No, that's Lindell's. Oh, Navarro report. Okay, there we go. I'm so sorry, Mr. Navarro. Okay, so on the 4th of November 2020 at 5:38, a person or persons residing in Middlesbrough using Virgin Media as their internet provider removed 31,004 votes from those cast in favor of President Donald J. Trump in Michigan. Michigan was one of the swing states in the USA. Right, 31,000 votes flipped in Middlesbrough. Like, how many other people have spoke about that? Right, like I mentioned it, I submitted it to the our counter-terrorism unit and shared it as many places I could. Right, here we go. I'll copy the link because I'll forget otherwise. So let me just, that's that. Let me go to X. Xy. Oh, I know. Look, finally, he's like worn me down, and I start calling it X rather than bloody Twitter. I mean, he's probably happy, isn't he, that I no longer call it Twitter. Right, let's just drop this. There we go. Okay, this was my 59 page. Oh, I was ill after this, writing this page. Submitted to it's what I tried to give to the NCA, what I tried to submit to the Crime Stoppers, and this is how I know that they were lying, saying that the NCA just ignored their information, because this is what I was trying to get to the NCA, and he was telling me exactly what I needed to do, how to go about it, and how to put it out there so that they may then be pulled in, because it definitely would be within their remit, but they just can't do it from people. So the UK Terrorism Office. So police. I don't know. I did it online. And I got a crime number. Anyway, there we go. So It's just bullshit, isn't it? So yeah, so Kash Patel, I mean, it was obvious. And Dan Bongino, like, wasn't he ripping people off? And then, like, everybody knew that he was a shill, and then he got cancer, and everybody forgot he was a shill because everybody felt bad for him. And I'm not saying we don't feel bad for people with cancer, but we don't then forget that they're, like, not good people, right? The kids, it's like all of a sudden, oh, he's a good person now. He's not being paid. He's not, like, I remember that entire thing, that it all came out, like everybody was like angry with the guy, and then he got cancer, and then I was like, oh my God, I feel really sorry for him. And then he got, like, made the deputy. Oh yeah, he's a great guy. And I'm like, they are rewriting history in front of people's eyes, and the people just don't see it. Like, I don't know how people can't remember. Like, I don't even have a great memory, like, at all. I am one of those people who go upstairs, forget why I've gone upstairs, go back downstairs, and then I remember, right? Eventually remember what I was supposed to be doing. I have literally got I've got, like, my entire office is plastered with freaking sticky post-it notes. I'm always writing on my hand because I don't remember the things that I'm supposed to be doing. So how is it that people are forgetting what happened with these people, especially the people who were high-profiled people? So what's coming next? Epstein wasn't real. It was all a dream. Like, one of those things. Like a really shitty film. Oh, and, like, Mandela effect, right? That never happened. And this is obviously a really great way to turn people against potentially the good people in Trump's administration. But they do say you can't tell people, you have to show them. So, but also, if there was no list, then they've got no reason to keep any of the files, right? They should open source it. And then we can all use AI to figure out what's really in there. So if there was no list, then how is it that the victims got shitloads of money? How is it he was already convicted of doing something similar many years before, right? So it's like, I just don't understand how people think they can get away with, like, lying so blatantly. Well, I mean, obviously they can get away with it because they fucking are, right? They just are. And everyone's going to say that Trump shut it down because Trump's on the list. Of course he's on the list. He was the instrumental in having him fucking arrested in the first place, like in 2000 or having him convicted in 2009, right? We know that. And he was, with his videos of him at Mar-a-Lago, we know that Epstein probably gave him younger women, not necessarily underage, but I mean, they might have been underage over in USA because it's like you have to be 18, right? So how many of you women out there have snuck into clubs and then would have happily and I'm not saying this is what the Epstein victims did, right? But I just want to put it into context that blackmail is the currency, right? So it's very easy to do these things to people who aren't aware of what's going on, because that's how you blackmail them, right? Somebody who's happy raping children is not probably going to be blackmailed by going, oh, we've got a video of you with a 17-year-old. They'll be like, I don't fucking care. She was 17. Like, don't release the videos of me with a 2-year-old, right? That's what, like, and actually, but okay, so I want to roll it back again. So how many of you have been in a club or a pub or a bar or anywhere when you were underage and you were drinking, and how many of you went up to somebody and said, hi, I'm in here illegally? Or if you were bought and sold, right, and you knew if you mentioned that, you would be beaten, tortured, murdered, all of that other shit that happened, how many of you are going to go up to the person you've been trafficked to and be like, oh, just a quick disclaimer here, that guy over there, he locks me in a fucking cage and he beats me and he rapes me. He's brought me to you today. I'm underage. We've got this entire elaborate sting where we're going to ply you with drink and apply me with drink. Then we're going to go back to a hotel, which, by the way, just so you know, there's like 8 cameras in there. So make sure you kind of grin at the wardrobe so we can get you like full frontal. So then I'm going to suggest some really horrific and dodgy things, and I'm going to make sure that you are drugged up enough to do it all. And then when we wake up in the morning, then we can start blackmailing you. So I'm going to do this because otherwise I die. They're doing this because probably they're going to get killed by the people who own them. No, that do we think that's how any interaction went with anybody who was, so I'm not saying that there aren't victims who were trafficked at all, but how many of them would have gone up to the person who they were hired to be the honeypot for, have gone and disclosed that's what they were doing? And how many of you, especially women, have snuck into clubs, drank, maybe tried things that you shouldn't have tried just because you were there and you were drunk and you're with your mates and all of that shit happens. And then maybe if somebody with lots of money, showed an interest in you, you're going to go along with it for a fun night, right? So we've got an innocent thing happening and a very uninnocent thing happening. And the only way somebody would know was if somebody told them, right? So let's be really careful. And this is why I say, just because somebody's had a picture with somebody, it doesn't mean that they're also evil. And I will talk about myself again, right? There's pictures of me with fucking Boris Johnson. Because I didn't know then. Right? I didn't know he was a coke snorting elite, probably a paedophile, because they all are, right? I didn't know that. Doesn't mean I'm in the gang. Absolutely not. But so we have to be really careful. You have to start engaging your logical brain, which you can't do if you are emotive. Right? I want you to, before you start getting angry about things, I want you to really kind of consider, what does the proof show about this individual? Right? What is the proof about this individual? Do they have a history? Okay, so like here's an example. Telford's MP, Sean Davies, who is a vile individual. Right. And I've met him on multiple occasions, right? Absolutely vile individual. Who, like, councils are run like mafias. Right? They are organized crime family syndicates. Now I don't think Telford is run into the same level as Manchester, and it's not because Oldham and Sheffield and all of those places, because I've met the people on the council. They don't have that high level of intelligence. I'm just throw that out there. And they don't. Anyway, so I've met him. Where was I going with this? Okay, history. Okay, so he his track record on grooming gangs, right? So he was the leader of the council for many years. So we go back to the fact that he was a lawyer, and supposedly is a lawyer, who was with his law firm in charge of the books and the money stuff, and the law firm. And I've got like black shit all over my hands from somewhere. Like I've been rubbing newspapers. I haven't. So then it was improper accounting, concerns around fraud, money laundering, and so they dissolved, right? So the law firm dissolved not much later. He then became like the leader of the council, because that absolutely kind of gives you good standing for hiding council money, obviously. And it wasn't a hushed up, like, this was in the papers, like, this was, everybody knew. And actually, I know the person he then went and worked for. Anyway, so then he became, the leader of the council, and then he became known as one of the Telford 10. The Telford 10 were the people who explicitly blocked Telford being part of the National Inquiry. And one of the other Telford 10s is somebody on the Conservative side who was the Police and Crime Commissioner, right? So there was 10 people in Telford in positions of authority, the majority on the local council, but also the Police and Crime Commissioner, who blocked Telford being part of the National Inquiry. Then we had the vote in Parliament, where he abstained from voting for another inquiry, right? So his track record with regards to grooming gangs and corruption is not good, right? So if he comes out in 2 weeks' time and says, I've wanted, like, everybody to be investigated for grooming, including the council, I've been talking about it forever, like, people need to go, look at your track record, right? That's what people need to be doing when they are looking at people, right? And he's like a really obvious example, but people wake up and they're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Like Russell Brand, okay? He was notorious during his drug-fueled, alcohol-infused heyday for the things that he was doing to and with people, not necessarily consensually, right? The way that he behaved towards that person's daughter on the radio and thought it was a good idea, I'm sure it was a daughter on the radio, and thought it was a good idea, just shows you his level of humanity, like. And I'm not saying people can't redeem themselves. I'm not saying that. But part of redemption and forgiveness is atoning for the shit you've done, not pretending it didn't happen. And not once has he ever addressed the fact that he was in the Illuminati, right? Never. He was on Alan Carr's Chatty Man. And Alan Carr said, so what about you being in the Illuminati? And he changed the subject, right? And this was on his road to redemption, right? I've told you all, and I apologize over and over and over again for electing 2 Conservative MPs, right? I apologize for that. I haven't hidden it. I haven't covered it up. I haven't pretended it hasn't happened. I was never in the Illuminati. I was never in any cult. I'm not even in any religious cult. But like, so you can't expect people. Okay, so I say you can't expect people, but people have literally pretended people's history haven't happened. And this is why we're now at a place where Epstein killed himself, where he didn't have a list and probably never existed, and it was all in your mind, right? So now people need to start thinking about the reality of this statement. If Epstein didn't have a list, then why is Ghislaine in prison? And now she has grounds for acquittal because she never trafficked to anybody. And she was supposedly Epstein's co-conspirator, but now they've said Epstein wasn't actually doing anything wrong. He just happened to be in prison and there's no evidence that he was a baddie, right? Which is what's coming, right? So if she was much like Diddy, like, didn't I say he would not be charged and convicted for any of the kind of racketeering stuff? Because he couldn't be, right? So the same as now we're in the predicament with Ghislaine, who was a co-conspirator, who was charged by herself because Epstein was dead. So now her charges, like, she didn't traffic to anybody and he didn't have a list, so she couldn't traffic to anybody on his list. Is anybody else kind of spotting this, or is everybody just focused on the fact that they've lied, right? Nobody's thinking with what's going to happen next, right? Wait and see. Watch that space. But Ghislaine, I mean, if I was Ghislaine, I'd be like, oh, right, well, that's okay then. Like, I didn't traffic to anybody because you never told anyone who I trafficked to. Isn't it all interesting that this has happened not long after Virginia Giuffre's passed away? And I know that she was doing lots of good stuff, but there was also lots of stuff which were very suspect. But she was abused for a very long time. And not exactly somebody who had full cognitive capacity, right? So we do have to remember that when somebody is not mentally healthy and mentally well, they will make lots of very bad decisions. Doesn't automatically mean they are bad people, but will also be very easily led astray by people who aren't good people. She was also being drugged and beaten up by her partner, right? So routinely. So how do we know some of the dodgy stuff she was doing wasn't when she was high as a kite, maybe on scopolamine? Maybe they were using, maybe she had a chip in her head. Maybe they were using voice to skull technology. Maybe they were using light to trigger the brain to behave in a different way. Like, all of this technology is out there. None of this is like Star Trek technology. All of this technology is out there and been patented and being used for a very long time. I mean, you may or may not be aware that they actually started implanting messages into people's dreams in 1920. Because I've read the book. Like, it's a literal book talking about all the research that they were doing with regards to implanting messages in people's minds while they're asleep, right? And all the research they did and the failed experiments and the patents. Oh, sorry, I forgot. That's brand new technology they brought out 2 years ago. My apologies. Right? None of this stuff they're bringing out now is new. Like, Elon's chip was not the first person to do it. They were chipping people before World War II. Right? Let's remember one of the most insane experiments that was going on prior to World War II. I'm pretty sure it happened before World War I, but I may be getting my dates slightly muddled. Was the Russian scientist who chopped the neck and head off a dog and attached it to another dog. So he made like a dog with two heads. Like, there was a live dog, and then he took the head and neck from a live dog and he attached it physically to another live dog, and he created a double-headed dog. Now, it didn't last for a very long time, but it was alive, and that was over 100 years ago they did that. So everybody thinking all of this technology that you're doing now is brand new, just kidding yourself with what's really going on and has been going on. Like, they were cloning people. I mean, not very successfully, right? So they just, the capacity, the reliability of the research got better. The ease at doing stuff got better. Doesn't mean they weren't doing it beforehand, right? When they told everybody about Dolly the sheep, they would have been doing it for at least 20, 30 years before then, right? Because you don't do an experiment and all of a sudden it's just, oh, look, it works. It takes a long time. So I would suggest that the Nazis had already figured out how to do cloning. And the only reason they released the whole Dolly stuff is because they thought they had chilled people out enough about it that we can talk about this now. Didn't they read that room wrong? But it doesn't mean it hasn't been being done behind the scenes. Anyway, so we're going to remember the 7/7 hoax, right? And it's so the thing that we have to consider first, and I'm just going to frame this first. Am I going to do Jesus last? So whether it was a psyop or a false flag or a real event, whether people really died, didn't die, any of those things, with this specific event, it doesn't mean that when there is a false flag or a psyop, people don't actually die, right? So it's really important we clarify this. Sometimes they set things up and they just don't give a shit with how many people were killed, right? So 9/11 is the perfect example of actual thousands of lives lost for shits and giggles on the part of the cabal. So yes, the 52 bodies of the victims were never autopsied, I mean, they were blown up. I'm not sure how you do an autopsy on a exploded person. But so that's kind of one of the things is, oh, there was no, they'd be like, here's the tooth of the person you knew. Can't exactly autopsy a tooth. Anyway, but obviously there are lots of inconsistencies, but it is really important to remember. So at the moment we've got Lucy Connolly, psyop, right? Doesn't mean she's not in prison necessarily. Doesn't mean that she's not being used as a guinea pig. Doesn't mean that she's a willing participant in what's going on. Just because it's a psyop or just because it's a false flag, it doesn't mean that people aren't being harmed. They do not give a shit about anybody. They just don't care. Like, it's not always complete fabrication with what somebody's going through. So let's just be mindful of that before we talk about 7/7. Okay, so I have been doing some super digging again because I was like, oh, I wonder whether maybe we could access more information nowadays. The answer is like no, by the way. In a nutshell, not really, but actually it's been beneficial with like asking Grok to do stuff and then being like, wait a minute, that just doesn't make, but you just said this and that doesn't make sense, and Grok having to go, you're right, that really doesn't make sense, let me analyze it a bit more. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, okay. Anyway, so if you haven't seen the ripple effect, you need to, right? And actually there's an extended ripple effect version, which is the one I initially watched. So this is the one from 2019. Let me just drop that on X. There we go. So it's an interesting documentary. Okay, so here's kind of a summary though for those of you who kind of don't really know much about the whole hoaxness of it. Okay, so summary of the false flags claim. So a 2004 BBC Panorama, so starting with the mock exercise and foreknowledge. So 2004 BBC Panorama programme simulated a terrorist attack in London involving the 3 tube train explosions and a road vehicle, mirroring the 7/7 attacks. And Mao Dib, who's the author of the documentary filmmaker, suggests it was a rehearsal to control media narratives. And we saw that with regards to Event 201 and COVID, right? On 7/7, Peter Power of Visor Consultants ran a mock terror drill with a near identical scenario involving 1,000 people, including police. Power later claimed it was similar office-based exercise for Reed Elsevier, which Maudeb disputes as implausible for a publishing company. So the presence of dark-coloured Jaguar at Luton Station on both a practice run, 28th of June 2005, and the 7/7 raises suspicions about a handler's involvement. So CCTV and evidence manipulation, and this, for anybody who's looked into it, is by far the most compelling evidence of utter bullshit. Well, this and Canary Wharf. Variant Systems, an Israeli company responsible for London Underground CCTV, reported non-functional cameras with no footage of the 4 accused boarding the trains. Israel. A Luton Station CCTV image showing the 4 men is allegedly doctored with anomalies like missing limbs, blood faces, and inconsistent reflections, suggesting fabrication to frame the accused. And if you see the CCTV stills, like, all of that is like blatantly obvious, right? There's legs in all the wrong place, like genuinely legs in the wrong places. No CCTV or reliable witnesses place Hasib Hussein on the number 30 bus, and his ID, along with Khan's, was found at multiple blast sites, which is deemed implausible for suicide bombers, right? If you've been blown up and if you were carrying out a terrorist attack, so there was 4 bombers and 4 locations. So according to official narrative, is each of those bombers wandered around all of the places first, dropping breadcrumbs of their, like driving licenses and stuff like that, right? That's what they did. That's the same as the passport fell from the aeroplane 9/11. They went and dropped multiple items across the potential places that they were going to do this event. So the 4 accused as patsies. So the 4 men were allegedly recruited as actors for the mock drill, carrying mock explosives in their backpacks. They bought return train tickets consistent with participating in an exercise, not a suicide mission. So, I mean, that's an interesting take. I don't know whether you bought train tickets back then. But I mean, I know that I used to buy a train ticket from Telford to Shrewsbury, and it used to be the same price. I know sometimes the singles was more expensive. So a return ticket, they may have bought a return. I mean, this is, because I'm just giving my interpretation of some evidence, is they may have bought the return ticket as a cover, but also because it was cheaper. And it probably, an off-peak return, if anybody's bought train tickets, they do tend to be cheaper than the actual, single. It's insane, but anyway, Mohammed Sadiq Khan, it's interesting, isn't it? Sadiq Khan and Shehzad Tanwir were linked to Operation Crevice in 2004, which was an MI5 investigation suggesting they were MI5 assets infiltrating extremist groups, and their suicide videos were likely made for credibility with extremists, later edited to frame them, right? So there's so either they were on MI5's watch list and then they weren't being watched very well, or, I mean, bearing in mind we have 40,000 people on the watch list right now, so 1 in 100. So, I mean, that's a lot of people, right? I definitely don't think it was that back then. But also technology wasn't the same as it is right now. So unless somebody, just because they were on the list, it doesn't mean they were actively being monitored, right? So, which happens, because you'd have to have 40,000 MI5 agents or MI6 agents, like one person. You'd need 2 people permanently analyzing these people for everything that they're doing. So you need 80,000 people just following the 40,000 terrorists if you wanted to do it properly without technology, right? Because you'd have to be reading their social media posts. You'd have to be listening to their conversations. You'd have to be tracking where they're going. If you've ever seen any any film where they are surveilling people. How many people are on the surveillance team for one person? Right? There's an army of people. They have locations, they have people in cars, they have people sat listening to shit in offices, right? So logistically, if you were to actually surveil all of the people on the terrorist watch list, I mean, this is going up and up and up. It's not even 1-to-1. It's not even 2-to-1. You're looking at maybe 10-to-1 to have a good comprehensive understanding whether these people are doing anything dodgy, right? And you are spending, there's 800,000 people. It's just insane. It doesn't happen, right? Let's put these things into perspective. People aren't paying attention to, like, we've got to engage our logic, right? I mean, emotion's great, but when we're analyzing anything, you cannot do it from an emotional standpoint. You have to step back and be like, okay, but this doesn't make actual sense. Okay, so if they were on the watch list, very easily, like, not noticed. Maybe they kind of checked in with them and hadn't seen any activity, and maybe they were more concerned with other people who, because let's not forget, they do stop terrorism shit from happening. So they are watching and dealing with some people. So maybe everybody was just dealing with the people. It's a risk. It's done by risk analysis. So the highest threat are the people where you put your limited resources. So, or they were recruited as assets. And this is something that isn't just exclusive to MI5, MI6. The police have done it for over 100 years. We saw it a lot in Northern Ireland. Undercover operatives and agents. Maybe these individuals were on the list and they did a deal, right? How many people get rolled up in prison and then they come out with completely different attitudes and all of a sudden blow up all over the place and become internet famous and stuff? Tommy Robinson. Go back off there, right? But if you've looked into his history, but all right. Anyway, so maybe they were on the payroll because they did something, and they were like, okay, either you inform on the the people who are in the mosques, who are recruiting, who are plotting jihad. You're saying you're not. You were just doing some dodgy shit with whatever they were doing, right? You now need to be an informant, right? So maybe they were confidential informants. And do they keep a track of their confidential informants? Like, they don't stick to them like glue, right? So whether they were on, this is why this is a bit, because once they've been used for the thing that they were designed to be used for, they just go in the, they go in the Rolodex to be called on next time they need them. And if they didn't consider them to be a threat, then they wouldn't have been being watched, right? Maybe they weren't a threat, and then because they were coerced into spying on all of the radicalization stuff, they then became radicalized. It happens. Look at all the people who go to prison and turn into radicalized Muslim, not Muslim terrorists, radicalized jihadis, right? Because I think we need to separate the religion from the psychopaths, like we do with other religions, right? So just because somebody's a Christian psychopath, you don't then assume all Christians are psychopaths, right? So we've got to stop being hypocritical. Okay, so Khan may not have travelled to London due to his wife's medical emergency, and the other three were likely shot at Canary Wharf after realising they were set up. Explosives and bomb placement. So witnesses reported no backpacks or Muslims in the bombed train carriages, right? So it'd be very you wouldn't get that statement nowadays with the number of people who are in London, right? And I mean, you wouldn't necessarily know somebody is a Muslim by looking at them. However, the 4 individuals had a distinctly Arab look about them, right? So they weren't, because you get Murabs, you get Muslims from many different nations, right? But what they mean is they reported no backpacks or individuals who were easily identifiable as not Caucasian. Right? That's what they mean by that. Or not wearing different clothing, right? So the only people on the trains people thought were, British, English, and or were wearing everyday normal clothing, right? Because they didn't stand out. That's what they were saying. Because that's a really strange way to suggest. Like, how would you know somebody's like Muslim, Christian, Jewish? I mean, yes, Orthodox Jewish, yes, very strict Muslim. But I know Muslims who went on like just everyday clothing, right? Because it's not like it's a really strange way to put it. Anyway, so the explosions, that was what witnesses reported. Right? So they didn't see anybody who they hadn't considered as a British national. But it was. You see me get kicked off again? So they didn't consider anybody. Oh, it's really strange to pick a religion. Because how do you look Muslim? I mean, it must be they must be using ethnicity in place of religion, because otherwise that doesn't make it just doesn't. Anyway, because remember, Andrew Tate's now a Muslim and he was born in Luton. Then he's Luton through and through, right? Anyway, bloody dog hair. So the explosions came from under the train floors, causing upward damage and derailment, indicating pre-planted military-grade explosives, not homemade bombs as claimed. So the number 30 bus diverted to Tavistock Square. It was likely pre-rigged with explosives, as CCTV was disabled during a suspicious 20-hour service before 7/7. A witness, Richard Jones, with explosive experience, gave inconsistent accounts, suggesting he may have planted a bomb. This is what Ripple Effect is saying. The bus's explosions symbolism, for example, outright terror, which was a play that was advertised on the side. Proximity to Tavistock Institute hints at a ritualistic act. And for those of you who don't know about the Tavistock is the institution that does all of the programming, brainwashing, also turning young children into it's not a different gender, but mutilating young children and brainwashing them into believing that they are trapped in the wrong body. So Tavistock is dodgy as fuck. So Canary Wharf shooting. So reports on 7/7 claim 3 terrorists were shot at by police in Canary Wharf, inconsistent with the suicide bomber narrative. This suggests the accused were eliminated to silence them after they realized they were patsies. I mean, it's so not necessarily. So that's an opinion, right? Because if they were shot and killed on Canary Wharf, then we don't have a shoot to kill order, right? By the way, but that's because this was what was all came out of it. We actually don't have an official shoot to kill order. Anyway, if the police spotted 3 people running around who looked like terrorists and they said stop police and all of that shit, then they were going to kill them, right? Because they were heightened. I mean, they shouldn't have killed them. They shouldn't have. Same as with John de Menezes. Was it John Charles de Menezes? Oh, here we go. Jean Charles de Menezes, right? So he you don't have to kill someone to disable them. And how many of us say that when we're watching American TV shows, right? Oh my God, you shot him in the head. Like, why didn't you shoot him in the knee? Like, or shoot him somewhere where you haven't killed, you're not going to kill him, right? What information are you going to get out of a dead person, right? So the fact that all 3 were murdered is when we don't have a shoot to kill order, right? So somebody would have said, shoot him in the head. And that person should have been up on murder charges because we don't have a shoot to kill order. Whether we do now, we didn't then. But it doesn't mean that they were necessarily eliminated to silence them. It just means perhaps at the time they got the intel, they got non-dodgy CCTV, recognized the individuals, attempted to detain them and were unable to, and then used lethal force, right? So foreknowledge and cover up. So remember, it was the Israeli CCTV, and now we've got Chinese tech. So Benjamin Netanyahu was warned by the Israeli Mossad not to leave his hotel before the first explosion, implying foreknowledge. Scotland Yard denied issuing this warning. Ephraim Halev's article, published hours after the attack, described near-perfect execution, suggesting insider knowledge, and the article was later removed. Harun Rashid Aswat, alleged mastermind, was an MI6 agent protected from arrest despite being a prime suspect. Right? So that is compelling. So potentially he was the bomber's handler, right? Without them realizing that they were being handled, because it happens, right? How would you know? How would you know if you were not open to all this conspiracy stuff, if you hadn't had your eyes awakened, maybe because of the overt bullshit in the Rona pandemic, if you hadn't have seen all that stuff, and all of a sudden you've got you just happen to meet somebody in a bar a few times. What's it called? It's there's an actual police play where they will use 2. Is it called the big guy play? Mr. Big. It's called a Mr. Big, right? Play. Where there's 2 people, if they're recruiting guys, it'd be 2 guys, right? Because they're Muslim as well, so they would use a Muslim person, right? So they would use somebody of the same, if you both did knitting, they would use a knitting person, so somebody who is potentially got some aligned interests. So the Mr. Big thing, and is so like perhaps you'd have a couple of Muslim families move into the area, and then you happen to be at the same mosque. Maybe the kids go to the same school. Maybe the mums become actual genuine friends because they don't always know that their partner's an agent, and then you become really good friends with this person and you have lots in common. Like, are you instinctively going to know that you are being recruited as a patsy in a fucking cabal plot? No. Like, you're not going to know. And this is what they do all the time. So the Mr. Big ploy is it spans over months. It's not like a chance meeting and then like, hey, let's go do a terrorist attack. Look at the whole Gretchen Whitmore thing. It was like one real person and the rest of them were all federal agents, right? So this is something that they do and they use. So over months, this person was groomed. These people were potentially groomed to do the things that they needed to do. Just because they're adults, it doesn't mean they're not easily influenced. And also, if they were using other technology, so fluoride makes you more suggestible, which is why they want fluoride in the water, right? It's easier to brainwash you. This is why you had so the pink drink, for any of you who was like G&T kids, and I don't mean like gin and tonic, I mean gifted and talented kids, and every time we went to the dentist you had those little pink fluoride drinks, and then your brain waves are more easily manipulated, right? How many horror stories have come out about dentists doing things to patients and then them not realizing, right? Pink drink. But they, this is so if you go back to names, Names are escaping me today. You have to bear with me because there's a few things going on in my family at the minute. They got me tad distracted. And I always have issues with names and dates. They're in that part of the brain that just doesn't seem to work as well. Barry Trower. Got there eventually. Barry Trower, who was a UK naval intelligence officer who was responsible for investigating and creating microwave weaponry during the Cold War, so 50s and 60s. Right, so the we now call DEW weaponry, like direct energy weapons. So they were developing that technologies in the 50s and 60s, right? So we've got Havana syndrome, we've got schizophrenia is a predominantly male disorder and appears teenage years, right, during puberty. So, which has always been very strange to me, because there is no, like, so less than 1% of all disorders, whether physical or mental health, has ever been linked to a specific gene, right? And when we're talking about like gene-based disorders, I'm talking about things like Down syndrome or chromosome deletion, right? The actual genes being identified as the actual reason, not, oh, when somebody is depressed, these genes are also like behaving differently, right? That could be so correlation is not causation, right? It's only less than 1% has been causally linked, and they're all physiological disorders, not mental health disorders. What that then means is you will probably share my confusion as to why any mental health disorder is prominent in it has variations in prominence depending on sex. Because everybody's brain's the same, whether they're male or female. They just, and we all have the same like sex hormones, we just have them in different amounts, right? And it's not like we see an increased rate of schizophrenia in women who have higher levels of testosterone, right? So there's no kind of thread with regards to an increase in testosterone brings about schizophrenia. And the reason why I can say that with certainty, even though I bet there's no kind of study out there, is because what happens is once a woman goes through menopause, their estrogen drops dramatically. The estrogen and progesterone both kind of go through the roof, and the testosterone kind of like takes over, right? As I'm not saying as the completely predominant hormone, but like the shift is immense, and we don't have women OAPs all of a sudden developing schizophrenia. So voice to skull technology, again, they've been chipping people for a very long time. So they use like NLP. I mean, NLP is like bullshit, by the way, but you know, you can anyway, it's just NLP is like remarketed sales and marketing techniques that have been used, and just psychological techniques. There's no it just makes me chuckle when people say they're like a master NLP practitioner, and then they try and tell me that I need to learn NLP to be a better psychologist, and I was going to say something really evil then, so I'm not going to say it. I would just block them if they're on social media, because it's actual bullshit. Anyway, there's lots of other stuff that has to go on, right? So if you watch the brainwashing stuff, there's like 7 steps to brainwashing somebody. You know, you make them hungry, you make them tired, you get them emotionally invested in something, repetition is key, and that's why the church is so fucking good at it, right? Because you have multiple people doing it, right? And that's why the Ash conformity experiment's so powerful, is because if you are the only dissenter in a group, very few people will dissent, right? And I remember watching something in my first year at university. It was back then, it was the most horrific thing I'd ever seen. I mean, witnessed externally to my own like life experience. And it was a group of young lads, and you may remember this if you were, UK based and you're watching this. So there was a group of teenagers who lived in some high-rise flats. So the one lad lived in high-rise flats and they had a cat. And it was, there must have been like 14, 15, 16. So young lads. And the mum was out and there was like 5 or 6 of them. And they were kind of like laughing and joking and kind of egging each other on. And the cat was in the room, and it ended up that they threw the cat out the window just to see whether it'd land on its legs, right? So they kind of egged each other on, like, oh, it'll be fine, and they kind of did it. And I watched it, right? I don't know why, but I wasn't expecting to happen what happened, right? As part of my research, I was trying to understand group mentality and the extreme behavioral reactions that happen when you're in a group of your peers, right? That's what I was investigating. And then it survived. It ran up the stairs and they did it again. And there was like, they'd recorded it on their phones, right? So, and they did it again. And I'm pretty sure the cat survived a second time, and then it didn't survive a third time, right? And then they did an interview with the young lad whose cat it was, right? And he was visibly traumatized by the event himself, right? Genuinely traumatized by the fact that he had tortured to death his own like family pet. And this wasn't like a brand new pet. This is like something that he'd loved and nurtured. And when the person interviewing said, well, what made you do it? And he says, I don't know. They were grilling him, going, well, you can't say you don't know. And in reality, he was telling the truth. Right. And I want everybody to think back to the stupid shit they did as a teenager and then sit there thinking, now, what the fuck was I thinking? Why the hell did I do that thing? Because we just did, right? And actually teenagers have higher levels of risk-taking behavior, especially boys, and really low levels of capacity to think and comprehend long term. And actually it doesn't kick in until kind of like early 20s, but it's like the risk taking behavior, it doesn't compute that it's going to turn into something that's going to cause them harm negatively. And this comes into evolutionary psychology and the fact that at that prime age is they would be out fighting lions, and what you don't want to be doing is getting in front, and not necessarily lions, but like and staring down wild boar, like going out to get the food, is you don't want them to be like kind of get near the food and be like, oh, could skewer me, might just give it, somebody else want to get this one? Somebody else want to do this one? I'll go pick some berries, right? No, they just jump in without thinking, do it without thinking. And conversely, on the flip side, this is if you've ever seen the young teenager who, there was a woman who had a baby in a pram, and she was chatting away to somebody, didn't realize that the stopper, the brakes hadn't been put on, and she was like yammering away to somebody, and the pram rolled into the train tracks as a train was coming, and this young teenager, without thinking, jumped in front of the train to grab and jumped and grabbed the pram and the baby out of the way of the train. Right. So it's not always they're going to use this stuff to do horrific things. It's just to show you the inability of a brain to function in a way which we would deem as useful in society if it was turned on all the time. Right. If you are always recklessly just doing crazy shit without thinking. But that's what teenagers are like long term. But anyway, boys tend to have more of this behavior, and unless it's trained into somebody, because it's not there naturally, unless it's trained in, it doesn't happen. This is where you get psychopaths and sociopaths, right? So you train empathy out, and you train the natural instincts of survival in, regardless of cost, right? So psychopath is somebody who will do whatever they want to get to the top, regardless of who it hurts. A sociopath is somebody who takes pleasure in causing harm to other people, just for shits and giggles, right? So it's really important that people understand those two definitions, because people use the terminology psychopath all the time incorrectly, right? You can't be both a sociopath and a psychopath. You can only be one or the other, right? Because psychopaths have there is no feeling. They would torture a child and feel nothing. A sociopath gets pleasure from it, right? They're doing the act to feel good, and you can't. Oh God, Matt just walked past and the creaked head heart attack. See, this is what happens when you start talking about really dark stuff. Anyway, so back to 7-7. So they could have been groomed, right? Just because they're adults, it doesn't mean they can't be groomed. It's a legitimate thing that the police use. It's called the Mr. Big. I mean, that always makes me think of Sex in the City, which was grooming populations of women, right, into being independent and childless, and it being a good thing, right? So people get groomed in lots of different ways, right? It's what TV does. That's what computer games do. So we have to, again, step back from being overly emotional about these things and really start thinking about the reality of what's going on and the level of expertise and malice in the people who are directing the show. So yes, so we got there because there was an MI6 agent who was not arrested, and he just kind of like didn't happen. We don't talk about him. Sham inquest and lack of autopsies. Again, if somebody's blown up, there's not going to be an autopsy. But anyway, 2010-2011 inquest was criticised as a cover-up with no autopsies performed to avoid revealing the true explosive used. I mean, you don't necessarily have to do an autopsy, but you could examine the you can do chemical compositions. So body counts at Edgware Road and Aldergate were one short, excluding the alleged bombers. So there was a person who just was unaccounted for, a dead person who was unaccounted for. Witnesses reported 3 holes in the Edgware Road carriage floor inconsistent with Khan's alleged position supporting underfloor bombs, right? So witness testimony of the actual explosions, if you'd been blown up on a train, I find it very hard to believe. Say, for example, if the explosion happened in front of you and it came at you, right? So this will be the kind of inconsistency, right? If everybody in carriage A, who was at the front of carriage A, has got like blown up from the back, and everybody at the back of carriage A was blown up from the front, then you would be able to find a location of the device, right? And anybody who kind of watched it and survived, so didn't get completely mangled, would be able to be like, oh yeah, it, got the front of my face, right? Because I was sat here. And then if they've turned around and said, oh yeah, but he planted it at the back of you, you'd be like, yeah, but it came from the front. So there's witnesses who were injured. I think there was almost 800 people injured altogether, whose eyewitness account and eyewitness testimony is not necessarily always accurate because your brain fills stuff in. But if you've been injured by something coming at you, you are going to know it. And so you get PTSD, right? So when it just plays instantly. And so as soon as I mentioned, if you've been attacked by something coming at you, my brain flashed to when I was attacked by a dog. It doesn't change where the dog came from, doesn't change the entire thing now playing out in my mind, and it doesn't stop me remembering like it was this arm that got mangled, right? I don't forget and be like, oh yeah, maybe my leg got I know which arm was mangled. I know where the dog came from. I can see the dog in my mind's eye. I can see the man on the crutches. I can see the exact location in the woods. I can recall the weather. It was a clear day. Like, I've literally recreated the entire thing in my mind, and I'm no longer emotionally attached to it. Can you imagine being emotionally attached to it and mistaking where the bomb came from, right? That's not plausible, and the injuries would line up differently. Okay, so even if their mind's a bit addled, the injuries would help paint the picture. Okay. And then John Charles de Menza. So the murder of Brazilian electrician John Charles de Menza is 2 weeks later is linked to his possible role in wiring devices for the mock exercise, making him a potential whistleblower. His killing was staged to reinforce fear and silence others. And at the time of that happening, that entire thing was so for those of you who don't know what happened, is like he was going under the underground, and then there was police officers, I think it was police officers, counter-terrorism officers with guns running through London, underground station, like sliding down the fucking escalators, like causing we don't do that shit in England. Like, that might be something that happens in the USA that doesn't happen in England. I don't think it's ever happened since. The entire thing, when it happened, I remember watching it on the telly and being like, this is not how police behave in the UK. If they thought he was gonna bomb someone, but why would you run with your why would you run with your gun out, right? When you're like behind, like quite a bit behind. It was just like it's not done, and it hasn't been done since. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember any similar kind of insane style incident. Anyway, court evidence and outcome. So Maudib, who's the narrator, his trial. So he was arrested and extradited to the UK on charges of attempting to pervert the course of justice by sending his 7/7 ripple effect film to a court during the trial of the 3 associates who were accused of kind of doing the recon mission for the bombers. So he argued it was a lawful amicus curiae brief to present evidence, right? So these 3 associates were being charged because the bombers are dead. So that somebody needed to be charged, but not the MI6 agent. Somebody else needed to be charged because the public needed somebody to go down for it. But they were being charged not for being present, but for going to London on a reconnaissance mission beforehand. So basically, Maudib was saying, you need to watch 7/7 ripple effect because you're being charged for a crime, and there's lots of evidence to prove that the people who were the bombers weren't actually the bombers, and they were patsies, and it was set up and it was all faked anyway. So you can't be charged for being an associate. So you can't be charged in a conspiracy when the conspiracy didn't happen, right? So just like Diddy got off, and just like Epstein wasn't part of anything, and like Ghislaine will probably get let off because she's not part of any conspiracy or trafficking because it never happened, right? So the judge and prosecutor claimed the 4 men were guilty without evidence, right? The bombers, and misled the jury, right? So the actual evidence, so they weren't found guilty, right? So this is really interesting. Okay, so I'm going to take this outside of the 7/7 case. So there's lots of individuals who, since they've passed, a hell of a lot of evidence has come to light to prove guilt, but no charges were laid, and you still then have to say alleged, right? So I'm thinking about Ted Heath and the disgusting things he did to children, right? 100% paedophile. I'm not going to say alleged. I don't give a shit, right? But officially, and in a court of law, you would not say these people were guilty of a crime because they'd never been convicted of it, right? So they broke the law in their kind of arguments and statements, right? So that's not on. So they claimed they were guilty without evidence because there was no trial against the 4 dead people to prove that they were guilty of the crime, right? So they misled the jury in the case against the associates by saying that the 4 bombers were guilty of the crime, right? Because there was no trials. You can't do that. Anyway, the 3 associates were unanimously acquitted, supporting Mandelb's claim. He was also found not guilty, as the jury recognised his intent was to prevent a miscarriage of justice, and he challenged the Crown's jurisdiction, arguing it had lack of authority due to fraudulent legislation. And that's really interesting in itself, by the way. Anyway, so key court-related claims. So the fabricated Luton CCTV image would be inadmissible in court due to its evident manipulation, undermining the case against the 4 men. Right, so that's the publicly circulated CCTV evidence where people literally have legs in the wrong places. If you've ever seen any of those AI generated images where there's like a random arm which isn't attached to anybody, or people have got 6 fingers, or their ear is like looks really odd, that's how the CCTV looked. Like the legs are just the funniest. The legs are the funniest and they're the most obvious, right? So legs are in positions which cannot naturally be in position, right? And that was the evidence that they used to say that the bombers were guilty, right? Because of this Luton CCTV evidence. The other thing is that the CCTV evidence was taken showing them getting on a train, which they couldn't have gotten on because they didn't turn up at the time, right? So the time was manipulated and the image was manipulated because whoever manipulated the CCTV didn't get the memo that the connection was cancelled and they'd missed the train, right? So the entire timeline's thrown into doubt, right? So even if you take everything else, the timeline of when they did these things, it is completely kiboshed by the series, by the train or the connection or whichever one it was. It didn't happen, right? It was wrong. The CCTV that was used as their guilt couldn't have been taken when it was supposed to have taken because of the connection issues. And if that didn't happen, then there's no way they could have planted the bombs, right? So this is like, it's like somebody being murdered at 11 o'clock and them saying, Katie, you murdered them at 11 o'clock. And I say, that's really weird because there's me in A&E at 11:45, like CCTV, like me chatting to somebody, me being seen. I'm in A&E at 11:45. I got this, but then I've also got CCTV evidence of me going to A&E at 10 to 11. So I've got corroborating evidence either side of the supposed event, and them going, yeah, but that doesn't count. Okay. Sure. Anyway, so also we have to remember that London has like 20% of the world, back then had 20% of the world's CCTV, and the only image of them, Israeli CCTV, was that one doctored photo. That's it. That's the only evidence that they found, that they had, right? So while potentially Maudib's summarizations and projections may not be 100% accurate, you know, they may not be. He doesn't have the insider knowledge, right? He's only kind of going from what he saw outside at the time. What's being said doesn't add up in any way, shape, or form at all. So the other thing, and I kind of looked into the inquest as well, by the way, and that was she was just bullshit and a retard. So with regards to Canary Wharf, let me just 2 secs. Had to do a lot of telling off to Grok because he kept going to BBC and Guardian say, and I was like, no, you keep telling me they're legitimate sources. They're not legitimate sources. They've lied, and showing him lies and redactions. And they only ever do like a teeny tiny little, oh, oops. Okay, so here we go. The train time discrepancies. So the inquest acknowledged the Home Office's report error regarding the 7:40 a.m. train, corrected by John Reed's 2006 statement. It accepted the bombers took the 7:25 a.m. train from Luton, arriving at King's Cross Thameslink at 8:23 a.m., supposedly allowing them to reach the Underground by 8:26 a.m. So it's argued no train could have gotten the bombers to King Cross in time for 8:26, and subsequent Underground departures, citing a commuter's testimony and timetable records. They note the 7:25 a.m. train's 58-minute journey and rush hour delays make the timeline implausible. The inquest timeline, while tight, is feasible if the bombers moved quickly through King's Cross, supposedly. Like, so there's no way you get off a train at 8:23 and get across wherever you got to get across to. Bearing in mind, going back to John Charles Mendes, we had police with guns, like screaming, shouting, fighting through people. You know, a different train station, whatever. But you know, the fact that they couldn't get through rush hour, right? These are all people. So 8:26 is when it will be packed with commuters trying to get to work for 9 o'clock. It is impossible to do that. And if the police did it, they would have done it not at the same time. They would have gone, oh yeah, look, we can do this. But yeah, it is impossible. But I was looking for the stuff on Canary Wharf, because this is what took a while, because I knew it was true. I knew there was multiple reports, and it took me a while to get Grok to find it because I can't find it. So this is the thing, is we're having to rely on AI to find the things that we know are out there, because if you try to get it from a search engine, you can't find it. Where's my Canary Wharf stuff? This is the last little bit of info that's useful. Oh, okay, here we go. It's right at the end. Okay, so media reports cited by conspiracy theorists. So legitimate media sources who talk about Canary Wharf. So New Zealand Herald, July the 8th, titled a report titled Police Shot Bombers. Reports New Zealander claimed a New Zealander working for Reuters. So Reuters is an official, normally used newspaper. Said in London, 2 colleagues witnessed police shooting 2 apparent suicide bombers outside HSBC Tower at Canary Wharf at 10:30 a.m. on July the 7th. The report noted 8,000 workers in the 44-story tower who were told to stay away from windows for 6 hours. Canadian Brendan Spinks on the 18th floor reported a massive rush of policemen outside of the building, right? So there were people in the HSBC building who were told to stay away from the windows for 6 hours. Canadian guy ignored it. New Zealander who worked for Reuters reported on it, right? Canada's Globe and Mail referenced in the same New Zealand Herald article, it reported an unconfirmed incident of police shooting a bomber at Canary Wharf, citing similar observations of police activity. Radio 5 and other sources claim Radio 5 broadcast at 11 a.m. on July the 7th reported bombers shot at Canary Wharf, and a Danish TV2 news report cited an eyewitness, Marianne Jorgensen, claiming co-workers saw 2 men shot. So these reports were not repeated and denied by police. But let's not forget the BBC News reported Building 7 had been destroyed before it was destroyed, and it was destroyed live on air. So does that mean these shootings happened, or does that mean this was a seeded narrative that was potentially going to be used So this goes back to CIA and Mockingbird Media and how they used to plant stories in Cuba, and then it would be in Cuba's newspapers and Cuban radio. And actually, they created an entire radio station where they were just talking bullshit and propaganda, right? And then it would be picked up by legitimate sources and then used, right? So this is why I still don't understand why Trump hasn't repealed the shit that Obama did to the Smith-Mundt Act that stops propaganda being issued in America, because it keeps being reported as fact in the UK, right? And then the BBC report it, and then the USA report it because the BBC have said it, right? This is how they do circular reporting, obfuscate the narrative, and then make it look like legitimate sources are talking about it, right? So CNN says the BBC say it, and BBC says CNN say it, and they all kind of just bullshit their way to the truth, which is not the truth, and you look like an insane person. So did it happen? We don't know. Did they blow up? Blew up. Did they blow up? I don't know. Were they kidnapped and taken to a black site? I don't know. Were they squirreled away and paid off like the Apollo 11 people? Potentially similarly happened to the 9/11 aeroplane victims who weren't victims because there were no aeroplanes, right? Similar things potentially happened back in the Titanic, when if you go to the Library of Congress and search the Titanic, you will see the initial reports is everybody survived. Well, I mean, I just say everybody, the vast majority of people survived. But in order for them to then instill the Fed, they would have had to have executed the people they needed executed, paid off everybody else. I mean, it was easier back then, right? You just like witness protection people, relocate people. Maybe they just murdered everybody when they got off the boats. I mean, then it's not beneath them. Like, the very same people then were integral in, you know, the Bolshevik Revolution and the mass murdering of people, World War I, World War II. So, you know, them kind of people actually rescuing everybody from the Titanic, only for people to get off the boats to then be given water which is laced with cyanide and then just thrown back into the sea, is not inconceivable, because these individuals are sick. It was only March, it was like a month or so later when reports were saying that everybody died. And then what we have now is, the narrative we have now is like, oh yeah, well, we were all saying that there was going to be a fire. Right? And I'm like, well, what about the fact that everybody survived? So there was no fire. No, well, we've got all these photos that we found now, like 100 years later, legit happened. Of course it did. Oh, we found this person's diary. Yeah, okay. So if they keep finding evidence, it's because there's holes in the narrative that people are picking up on, and then all of a sudden they find we've oh look, you know that thing that you keep like, oh my god, like, you know, when everyone's like, there's no CCTV, oh, we found CCTV evidence. Wait a minute, you can't have CCTV evidence then, because like they missed the connection and the train's like an hour long and they would never have got there. Oh well, they definitely did, because the CCTV says so. And the police, they did it. You know, the same people who were corrupt are the people who are saying that it happened. Yeah, those people. Anyway. Okay. So basically, it was a false flag operation. Loads of bullshit. Does it mean that those people didn't die? I mean, there's an anomaly with a missing person. But does it mean those people didn't die and those people didn't get injured? No. People did die, people did get injured. But just didn't happen the way that it is portrayed to have happened. And it's important that we don't whitewash it or forget, because it laid the foundation. This is something that they do over and over. And if you look at the stuff at Northern Ireland, and the people being absolutely butchered by the army officers, that was a pretty horrific thing to kind of watch, with women, men and children just being gunned down. There's a I think, is it Bloody Sunday? Is that what that and so they do it, right? They do a thing because there's an agenda. They use people who are likely to go along with it because they felt them out beforehand. Kill people, quite happy to kill people. Allow it to run its course because they need something to happen afterwards, right? So we then had all the heightened control mechanisms and laws and all of that shit happened, right? Okay, so well, it's 9 o'clock. Okay, so Jesus was a pedophile. So I've been saying for a very long time that, not that Jesus was a pedophile, that was like news to me. But I have been saying for a very long time that Mary was Jesus' mum, that Mary was sold and donated, whatever you want to call it, into she was at the age of 3, she was given to become a prophet, right? So she was I mean, it's part of a cult, right? All religions are cults. The way that they are, it's about control and manipulation, and you can't have your own thoughts and be part of the religion. right? Because you're either Catholic or you're not Catholic, right? If you don't follow the Catholic rules, you're not Catholic. If you don't believe the bullshit hook, line, and sinker, then you are a heretic, right? Anyway, so I've said for ages Mary was, and this is because I've been reading like obscure texts that reference old material. So, you know, this archive.org is my favorite place on the internet. And when I see a podcast and they introduce me to somebody with very interesting ideas. So we had last week was that, you know, Moses didn't exist, and mentioned that the Septuagint was created in around 300 AD, was written in Greek, like was crafted in like fake Greek, so like fake Hebrew Greek, right? And then Hebrew came second. That was kind of the podcast I'd watched last week, stumbled on. So then I watched, and so obviously because I watched that one, I watched it all the way through, I got given another one. And this is a completely different, somebody coming from a completely different perspective, ended up saying the exact same thing, right? But has a completely different outlook. So the guy last week was born and raised Jewish. And then, you know, became a scholar, and he was he was using the leftover pottery, like they left like kind of, you know, like you write IOUs and you write, like I can say you write messages on your fridge. You potentially don't. I write messages on my fridge. I like random messages to Matt. And Matt will write random, I mean, Matt's messages are usually like, do some work, woman. Because if I'm reading the message on the fridge, I'm obviously not doing any work. My messages are thanks for dinner, love you, and his are fuck you. No, they're not. Sorry, sometimes they are. Sometimes, but I mean, sometimes they're nice. Anyway, but you know, like silly little messages. And so like shopping lists or you know, grab taught food, like those kind of conversations that we kind of do now by text message. We do say nice, he does say nice stuff to me. That was, I mean, but it's not done. It's not done me. I know we've been together for 24 years. We're definitely on the same wavelengths with, I say nasty stuff to him, but not like mean stuff. We have bants and actual banter. There's no hate crime going on in no domestic crime. There isn't, right? Just genuinely understand that it's all joke. And if he was to upset me, he would be mortified because I'd make him mortified. Anyway, so he was using the real life conversations between people to kind of try and track back. You know, he wanted to discover the roots of Judaism, right? To kind of have proof, right? Like, I believe in this thing, I understand this thing, I want to see the evidence. And then the interesting the podcast this week has been a guy. Hold on, I can grab it and download it. I'm just turning my sound off in case it rocks up and starts playing. I'll drop it. So just to preempt, he's on the spectrum, right? I mean, and Matt quite rightly pointed out, we are all on the spectrum, but some of us are further across than others. He doesn't make that explicitly. He doesn't kind of say, oh yeah, by the way, I'm autistic. But what he does say, he says, he's asked like, how did you get into ancient Greek, XYZ, and he says, well, you know, I'm a savant. And so for those of you who don't know, savant, somebody with an exceptional like off the charts talent in a specific thing, and usually has deficits in other areas. And most often, also are then classified as, they're usually like very high on the autistic spectrum. And somebody who is traditionally, somebody who is, savant like, and high on the autistic spectrum will have difficulties socially and behaviorally, and also which I think it would have been really useful had who's I can't remember whose podcast is this. I think, was it Danny Jones? Did I end up here? Yeah, I think I must have ended up here because I was watching Julian's, and Julian talks about him. I don't know how he just popped up. So I think it would have been useful had Danny Jones kind of actually looked into what savant was, and explained this to the audience. What kind of traits of somebody like quite high on the autistic spectrum is very often their capacity to step outside of logical reasoning is diminished. It comes under kind of deficits in imagination and storytelling. So if you were to say to somebody who's very high on the autistic spectrum with diminished capacity to with diminished imagination capacity, you say, I want you to imagine you're washing your teeth, right? So I want you to imagine in the corner there is a sink and you're brushing your teeth. Like, they're like, well, but I'm not brushing my teeth. They're not going to imagine but I'm not brushing my teeth. So it's just like you're trying to get them to use one side of their brain, and I say it's not a side. Your brain there's no creative and logic side. It actually works together and it all intermingles. I mean that's a bullshit myth that keeps getting peddled and drives me fucking crackers. But you're trying to use portions of the brain which are responsible for creative understanding and imagination, which isn't developed in the same way as somebody not on the spectrum. Similarly, somebody who has very high levels of black and white thinking, you could say to them, it's raining cats and dogs, which we know is just like we're pissing it down, right? And you could say somebody's pissing it down, they would be looking out the window for the cats and the dogs, right? Expecting to see the cats and the dogs, because they got very high logical reasoning skills, very low capacity to understand things that just aren't real, right? It's just not, it's not there. So when he was first talking and his behaviors, I was like, either this guy's taken a lot of drugs in his past and it is kind of damaged his brain in some way, or he's potentially on the spectrum. It wasn't long before he kind of mentioned savant and going to a special school, and I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. But then that contextualized a lot of stuff that he says. Right? He will be reporting the things he's found. He's just reporting it. Right? I found this thing. I've pieced this thing together from all of these ancient texts, which he's translated, being, learning and doing ancient Greek for decades. He's reading original text, original source material, and piecing things together. Right? So he's not. Being a savant is more likely to diminish his capacity to be just making shit up, because his brain won't be working in that way, right? So when you're, yes, it can be difficult to follow his trains of thought, right? I sometimes found it difficult, and my brain jumps around a lot. And I know that you will sometimes find my conversations difficult because of the way that my brain jumps around. Something else to understand is they can have deficits at understanding the way that other people interpret information, or the way that other people will be seeing the information. So somebody else's perspective. So they do this thing called the Sally Ann Dole test to test for theory of mind. And this used to be kind of like the gold standard for deciding whether somebody was autistic or not. So by a certain age, we can understand somebody else's perspective. Right, so the Sally Ann Dole test is there is a doll called Sally Ann, right? I know it's simple. I think this is important to kind of pre-frame this before we talk about this crazy shit, right? So you sit with the child and you have your doll, and you kind of like do an imaginary thing, like she's going shopping, and then you put her under a basket, right? So that you've got like somebody else in the room, and maybe you send the mum out of the room, and then you hide Sally Ann under the basket, right? So only you and the little child actually legitimately know where the doll now is, right? Because you've hidden it. And then the mum comes back in, and mum's like, where's the Sally Ann doll? And an autistic child with a theory of mind deficit, and that's all in your frontal lobe, your prefrontal cortex. It's the same area that was targeted by the FunVax, which is the fundamental vaccine, which is the one that everybody says was Bill Gates. It wasn't Bill Gates. It was a Department of Defense vaccine that was created around the same time as the 7/7 bombings. Anyway, but it's a theory of mind deficit that it targets the frontal lobe. And when I was talking about that specific vaccine, I went into the specific regions of the brain that it causes harm to, and what that translates into. So you and I would be like, if somebody said to us, where would the mum think to look for Sally Ann? Like, and we would be like, well, she would have no idea, right? She would like maybe, by chance she could look underneath the basket, right? But if the basket was always upside down, then that's not going to be different. But maybe if we ruffled some pillows, like, so we could like distract and divert, and somebody with theory of mind would be like, oh, wait a minute, well, we kind of like made those bits look dodgy. I think the mum's going to look over there first. The child with autism will be like, she's going to look under the basket because that's where it is, right? The child isn't going to comprehend that the mum's not going to know that. So, all children will behave like that until a certain age. And I'm not going to kind of put an exact age on it because it does depend on the enriched environment of the child. So even when you are giving out, they call them, oh shit, what's the word? You have like ages and stages. I can literally see the stuff that I give my parents, but I tell them, even if it says like 9 to 12 months, if your kid does it early or it does it late, as long as it does it, it's fine. Developmental stages, right? So they will put a rough age, but if a child's got a really enriched environment, it will kind of hit the earlier end of the age range, and maybe beforehand. If the child has a very neglected, deprived environment, it will take much longer, right? And fall outside. So there's always outliers. Anything that's done with regards to averages is always done on a bell curve, right? So the bell curve is like that. So you've got like outliers this side, most kids around the middle in average, and then it kind of peaks and drops. So you go up, top of the bottom, and like pretty much everything falls on this bell curve. So IQ 100's in the middle, but then you get outliers either side, right? And when it comes to intelligence and savant, it is like a natural intelligence. It is as intelligence increases, social and behavioral and creative capacity diminishes. So on the other side, there is a specific disorder where they have really low intelligence and off the charts social skills, which makes them extremely vulnerable, because they just trust everyone and believe everything. And I cannot for the life of me remember what it's called. It's really quite rare. Anyway, okay, so just bear that in mind if you decide to watch this podcast episode. And I've attempted to watch a couple of the doctor's actual episodes. Let me just tell you his name, because that's a bit rude of me. Dr. Ammon Hillman. And he was a professor, and he got kicked out because he was reading these ancient texts and started telling everybody, oh my God, they're all on drugs. They're all on drugs. All these prophets, they're all on drugs. And that's what I've been saying for a very long time. They're all on drugs. They're doing magic. How long ago did I say that Jesus was executed for sorcery? Because that was in one of the original documents that I found, like cross-referenced with multiple other documents, which obviously isn't in the King James Bible. So, but also with regards to Mary, she was sold at 3, and she was, so if you've heard of the oracles at Delphi, right? Greek oracles, young women, virgins, plied with drugs, so that they okay, so your body creates DMT naturally. DMT is your hallucinogenic stuff. So you've got to remember that we can all do this, because if you have PTSD, your body does this naturally, right? You can hallucinate, whether it's auditory or physically. You literally feel it, see it, smell it, hear it. Like you go back in time technically with what I mean. And I say PTSD. As soon as I say PTSD, I get the dog attack in my head. It's there again, because I've always used it as an example since it happened. Anyway, so for me, like, there is no emotional attachment, so it's just the imagery, right? So it's like, if I'm now talking about going food shopping, I'm going to imagine myself in Sainsbury's, right? Because that's where I went shopping last time. So there's no emotional attachment to it, but as soon as you are emotionally attached, then your 5 senses take over, right? So when you're not emotionally attached, it's your subconscious mind that's kind of playing it like a video. But once you've got emotion, then it's actually going to attach to your senses. And depending on the strength of the emotion, depends on how many different emotions are attached to it, right? So we can all hallucinate anyway, right? And when you use certain medications, you can do that more naturally. Also, and I think, was it last week I spoke about follow frequency and brainwave entrainment with regards to sound and hypnosis and the alpha state. Anyway, so you can, if your brain is in a certain wave state, you're more suggestible, right? But also 3.85 hertz is the frequency of the Schumann resonance, which is the strongest known Earth's heartbeat. So there's actually 4, but people only ever talk about the one. But that one correlates with the alpha theta border in our brain. So when our brain's at 7.85 hertz, it is in the it is on the alpha theta border, which is the perfect frequency for hypnosis. Also is the perfect frequency for telepathy. So if you've never watched Michael Parsinger's No More Secrets, he says 7 hertz, but it's not, 7.85, because you have to, your brainwaves have to tune into the Earth's superhighway in order for you to kind of come out the other end, right? Because otherwise you're on the wrong frequency. So yes, theoretically, As long as two people are on the exact same brainwave and have got focused intention, they would have a conversation. If you think about, how many real life testimonies of people knowing that their child has been in a horrific accident, right? They're nowhere near them, but they know. Like if they hear the child, they feel, they know one of their senses has picked up. I mean, that happens like a lot more with, mothers and children, because of the unique bond between the mother and the child. And a mother is a female, right? A man can't be a mother. A man can't give birth. So there are certain drugs that will do that as well, that will get your brainwave into that state. So this is why the CIA was testing drugs, and where LSD came about. So we have to remember that Jesus, what was mentioned in the Bible, he was given frankincense, myrrh and gold, right? Myrrh, frankincense, and gold, or whichever order they do it in. Frankincense is a known hallucinogen if you're using it in that way, right? And so how many times do you go into churches and they are like wafting frankincense and scents? And then you have people who are, speaking tongues, are, connected to the divine, right? So it's just your pineal gland and your pituitary gland, like secreting the emotions that enable you to like imagine stuff, right? Is it all imagination, or is it a downloaded? I am of the mindset that everything is connected. Like, I know with regards to energy, so let's just talk from physics standpoint. Energy is not created, it's not destroyed, it is just transferred or transmuted, right? So a dead person may no longer physically be here, but their energy is still here, right? We have the energy on earth of every single person who's ever existed, right? Because when they were alive, they were energy, because that's what cells are. That's what atoms is energy, right? Let's go back to physics. Atoms are energy. Everything's energy. There is no space between us. Not really. They'd like, just because I can't see the atoms whizzing around me doesn't mean they're not there. We're all connected. This is like, and if you look into the Psi research with regards to intention and distant healing, and distance healing is proven, statistically proven, more, what's the word? To the greater power and degree, like 2 billions % chance. So it is more proven than the efficacy of aspirin, right? When you look into actual Psi research, which has been done for over 100 years, right? Remember, just because they haven't been telling us about it doesn't mean they've been doing it. Doesn't mean they've not been doing it and using it. Just that, one of the reasons they stopped all the kind of like Gatewave, Girlframe, and Stargate stuff was because technology made it easier, right? You don't have to train somebody to harness their Psi capacities if they can just type on a computer. Right? So it's just easier, and people are lazy, right? So it doesn't mean that they didn't use it and it wasn't effective. It just became easier. So technology won out. So what they did back then is what they're doing now, right? With people who are tripping and people who are prophets. And, this is what Nostradamus did. I mean, did he converse with a demon? I think he probably did. Spoke to a bad alien. Can he speak to good aliens? Probably. If you're on the right wavelength, right? So when we talk about dimensions, it's just a different wavelength, the energy wavelength, right? It's not. There's multiple dimensions, multiple earths, multiple universes. When you look into like quantum physics, and it is mind-blowing if you're trying to comprehend it initially, but when you start taking those things into account, then you start to understand all of or that actually it's not possible and crazy, it's very plausible. Okay, so Mary sold into a cult, age 3. At 12, she was then kicked out, and I say age 12, might have been 11. It was whenever she, got her, became a woman. And then she was married to Joseph, who already had sons, who supposedly wasn't interested in any more women because his wife had passed away. So she was 12, if that. This is important context. So his mum was married off as soon as she was ejected from the cult place, the prophesying place, and she was like fully trained, right? So drugged up, trained to use. So like she's like a weapon, a psychic. So Mary was a psychic weapon, and either her or somebody else had the visions that she was going to be the one who birthed the Son of God, the Christ. The new Christ, right? Because there were other Christs. He was just the new one. And I mentioned the other day, virgin doesn't mean like didn't have sex. It just means it wasn't spoiled. I mean, I posited a while back that she was probably impregnated by the man who was overseeing the cult stuff. And so why do I think that? Is because I think she was probably also, if you read portions of the Old Testament, they talk about abusing children from the age of 3, which aligns heavily with intergenerational torture, and also then adopted under the MK Ultra experiments to create mind slaves, right? So it's not like they woke up in the 60s and were like, let's just start doing this thing. This is like intergenerational, right? For thousands of years. And they all the elites, the cabal, the actual insiders, not the people, not the puppets on the outside, they are very adherent to their bloodline and their rituals. So it's not, and you see it throughout, depicted in paintings. And it's not like they just woke up yesterday and was like, oh yeah, let's start raping a 3-year-old and see what happens. So it goes into like, when do you need to start abusing children in order to make them compliant? Is around 3, right? So which is interesting, because that's around the age theory of mind starts kicking in. And also children start to become more self-reliant, right? You can't have a self-reliant child. They need to be completely compliant, right? You don't. And if you think about the Victorian age, children should be seen and not heard, and they would be beaten if they spoke out. I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily the common people's kids needed to be seen and not heard, because most general everyday people needed their kids to work for them, right, in order to earn some money. But the elite children were picture perfect children who just did what they were told through fear, through manipulation, through brainwashing, right? It's not new. They were trained. So Mary, age and context is important. Would have been about 11 or 12, right? Unless she peaked early. But I've never seen anything to her peaking early. You also want to harness psychic abilities when you're a child rather than a teenager or an adult, because children's brains are in the alpha state, right? Once you kind of hit puberty, your brain wave changes into the beta state. So it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to harness a child's psi abilities. This is why lots of children have imaginary friends or see fairies or have conversations with random people, is they are using that portion of their brain frequently. You also, if you know, you harness a child's creative capacity. So drawing, coloring, building stuff, like all of that enhances their psi skills, because it's all portions of the brain which are not the kind of logical thinking capacity. It's like the imagining, imaging faculties. So this is why Ingo Swann was a really good artist, and he had really good psi skills. The best remote viewer was actually a lady who was a photographer, and they've never released her name. She's like forever been like secret, but she was never wrong with what she saw, ever. And they brought her on, as an aside, they brought her on into the Stargate program as a control, because she'd never done anything like that, and they were just like assuming this random woman would be useless, and she was the best of the best. I mean, so Pat, the guy who then ended up suicided, but supposedly working as part of Scientology, he was also supposed to be really good, but then this lady, they say that she was better, but she was a photographer. Pat was, he had a very similar thing. So if you've had a kind of creative background, you are more likely to be using alpha brainwave states more frequently, so it's easier for you to access the alpha theta border, which is the Schumann resonance, which enables you to tap in to the kind of superconscious highway and find all the information that's already out there. So there's drugs that can do that. So that's why, she was trained as a child, and as soon as she was, and so the reason why she was given away at the puberty is because as soon as they had their first menstruation, they were ejected from the cult, right? Because they and that's to do with the whole blood ritual and all of that sick stuff that we're not going to go into. But as soon as that happens, is you were out, and you had to now kind of use your powers. So she was 12. So this brings us to Jesus being a pedophile. Okay, so that was normal behavior for 12-year-olds. We also have to remember that one of the things that horrified me very recently is there was an adult marrying a 12-year-old in Florida only a few years ago. So this practice of marrying children is not old and not done. It's still done in lots of cultures, right? Didn't somebody just marry a 9-year-old? And didn't, like, Muhammad marry an 8-year-old? And for anybody saying that they didn't count ages, like fuck off, you retards. Anyway, as an excuse, right? So this was it was done across all of I say all, it was done across the major religions that we know about. But we have to remember they were dying younger. They were working from, up the chimneys at age 3 and 4. So the children weren't seen as children. They were seen as little adults. And as soon as they were useful, they were used. And that's what happened to the parents, right? So it's not looking at a child and being sinister. It's like, yep, I was... or look at the royal weddings, through, like, even just through English history. Like they weren't adults; they were children who were married off to each other as children. So this isn't unusual. So we have to be really careful. I mean, I know I did say Jesus is a pedophile, but we have to be careful about using today's standards and then judging people from the past. Right, okay, just that's a caveat. However, what we're about to discuss is quite disturbing. So the apostles were all young boys, not adult boys. They were all children under the age of 12, in and around 12, 10, 11, 12. Bearing in mind, Pi keeps trying to drop the age of responsibility to 10, right? We're perhaps about to find out why there's such an obsession with prepubescent children. And this is why this is important. So, they were all around 11 and 12, these apostles, these kids, right? So when Jesus is calling them children, he's not calling them my children because he's behaving like a father. He's calling them children because they're actual children. And in the Greek versions of the Bible, the day that Jesus is arrested, he is caught in a park with a boy who's naked, except for a bandage on his cock. Jesus has stuff all over his face. And the thing that Jesus shouts is, "I'm not a lay-stace." And that translates to a child trafficker, right? So, Christing is anointing somebody with drugs through the eye. And you find lots of references throughout the Bible. Like when he was talking about these passages, even I recognized some of these passages from things that I'd read, and I've not read the entire Bible. I've not read much of the Bible. Forget saying entire, I've not read much of it. So when Jesus was baptized, he felt the spirit of the Holy Ghost, right? And I've said for a long time, right? That sounds like drugs to me. It does. So why was he with a prepubescent boy who had a bandage on his cock? What was on his face? Well, what we find out is, and so there's a story, they talk about in the Bible with Mary having purple fingers and touching the midwife while she's, and burning the midwife, right? Mary's fingers burn the midwife. She has a purple. She has purple around her mouth. So purple is a drug. It's a type of, I'm pretty sure he was saying it was a type of snake venom. That turns your fingers purple, right? So it's a hallucinogenic drug, which was used in a lot of these rituals. So the Antichrist or antidote is prepubescent semen and prepubescent lactate, so from girls, right? So I didn't know you could milk a girl. Like, I also naively probably didn't realize boys actually, I don't know why I didn't. It just came as a shock to me. So I didn't realize the semen was different. So once testosterone and stuff kicks in, it's all milky, and then it's no good. So you need pre-milky semen. So when Jesus is caught, and he shouts, "I'm not a child trafficker," and he's stumbling around, right? So he's overdosing on his prophecy drug, and he needs the child, right? He needs the semen from the child to stop him from overdosing. And obviously they take the child. So the night before, he's had the Last Supper, and got all of these 12-year-olds into a drunken stupor because they're drinking wine and they're celebrating. And Jesus is an adult at this point. He's a grown man with all of these children, but also, as part of his inner circle, right? So those are his apostles, right? So do you remember I was reading the Rosicrucian stuff, and they were talking about the apostles, the disciples, and then the kind of the others who had to kind of go out and preach, and they all had like a different there was like loads of other people who were around them, some of them adults, but also his mum, his brothers and sisters, his so like this is it's a family affair, right? So the Essenes, we were a cult, and so when we call him a paedophile and a child trafficker, was he? I mean, we don't know. I'm not saying it's right, by the way, either, based on today's standard. Bearing in mind his mum was given away at the same age, so standards were very different back then. I mean, it was still unlawful. It was a civil matter if you could sue somebody for harm if they'd taken away your virginity, right? Because you'd been damaged. You were no longer a virgin, male or female, right? So you could sue somebody for that, but it was civil. So there was still some kind of, laws. But farming, I mean, so basically the children, he was using the children for their semen so that he could come down, like uppers and downers. But he would take the upper, and then he would do whatever he needed to the child to get the antidote. So why would he have a bandage? So this, and so just so you know, so Dr. what do I call him? Eamon Hillman, was saying they used to soak bandages in different drugs, and that would enable them to get hard, or stop an erection, or to so he was reading all the medical texts, right? So yes, he's been reading and translating bits of the Bible, but he's also been reading and translating other primary sources, and then you piece all these things together. So lots of the stuff that I try to go back to source, which I love archive.org, as much as possible, and I did find an 1886 printed Greek Bible that's used multiple different sources. I've also found an AI translator that does ancient Greek, but I only kind of found it like late yesterday. So I will go and find some of the passages and have a little hunt, and so I'll kind of like give you an update. But because I don't read anything that's not English. So he's not just reading the Bible, so it's important, right? He's got multiple primary sources that all corroborate this evidence, right? The same as the guy who then went to prison for being a Holocaust denier, and actually went and got primary sources from like Goebbels' wife and stuff like that. David Irving, who did go a bit strange, but I mean, you would do, I think, if you'd spent decades of psychological torture at the hands of the state, right? So this purple stuff is interesting, right? Because we had who is it? Prince's song Purple Rain makes so much more sense now, right? We have the phrase purple haze. We have purple being the color which is associated with your, so I would say purple is your pineal gland, if we were going to talk about color wise. So that's your the portion of your brain, it's your third eye, right? We have purple is the highest color in a lot of different religious ceremonies, also worn by royalty, right? So purple, 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 purple. But there's also, like, they've just found like 20,000 pages of a text that they're going to translate from a, like, not from a site like Pompeii, but it was like all burnt down, so they've never been able to translate because it's always been damaged. That was a library, so now they're going to be able to use AI to do it, and they've already analyzed some of it, and something in there is the word purple, right? So purple is a drug that they would use in order to turn into their psychic capacity, and the adults would have to use it more, whether they were trained to, and I would assume they were trained to use it as children, because if you want to develop so if you think you're going to be poisoned, you can like microdose, and then you can build up a tolerance. So the other thing, if they've been using it for a very long time, is they would have to use extended amounts in order to get the same hit, right? And so what Dr. Hillman says is, when he was on the cross, I mean, he says he dies, right? So we got Rosicrucian saying he didn't die, and he says he did die. I would suggest that he potentially just passed out from the drugs, went into a drug-induced coma perhaps, and then resurrected, maybe, you know, when there was little boys with him again in the cave, right? So I would Hillman hasn't read the Rosicrucian stuff because he's only reading, I mean, maybe you can find the actual original Rosicrucian stuff and tell us what it really says, but he's only been reading the ancient Greek, which is fine, right? He's staying in his lane. But there were little boys with him in the cave, so he was saying the vinegar isn't vinegar, it's an antidote. So the Antichrist is antidote. The Christ is the drugs. And early Christians, they were Christians because they were using these mind-altering drugs to, you know, prophesize, and this is why the Romans hated them, because they were the pariahs. They weren't pariahs because they were, you know, and you think about who Jesus hung around with, like the majority, you know, they talk about, you know, robber, like thieves, prostitutes and prophets. It's the druggies, and the lowest of the low, because he wasn't. So okay, so while we might be outsiders, I'm still going to interact with, I mean, I'm not going to shun a junkie or an alcoholic or a prostitute if we're having a conversation, but I'm probably not going to move into like Prostitute City and start chilling out with them because I'm over here. Do you know what I mean? So like, it's not that if your paths don't cross, you're not going to be a polite individual, but you're not going to be surrounded by the individuals who are, they shouldn't be in your circle, right? And so he was recruiting people who were easily influenced as well, who maybe needed saving. But also what occurred to me was, no wonder he was talking in bullshit all the time, right? Perhaps it wasn't cloaked so that you have ears to hear and eyes to see. Maybe he just said that because he was off his fucking tits. And he couldn't string a sentence together, right? Because how many of us have been drunk and had conversations where we make no fucking sense, and we think we're making all the sense, right? We're like, I don't understand why you don't understand what I'm saying. Like, I don't get why you don't get me. Like, I'm making perfect sense. Like, I'm literally saying blah, 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 blah. And everyone's like, you're just fucking drunk, hey? Get back in your corner. Right? And he would be happy if he was high all the time. I mean, he wouldn't be happy when he came down, but we don't know what was happening when he was down. You know, when he went into the wilderness for 40 days, right? And everybody did it for 40 days, right? Is that a specific amount of drug they took? I don't know. It's a whole different perspective. So then this poor the Hillman guy, you know, he was a Baptist. He was like all in on religion, all in on Jesus. Absolutely adored the guy, absolutely adored him. So he was obviously heartbroken when he found all this stuff out because he wanted to know Jesus, right? But loved him. He used to teach Sunday school, absolutely adored the guy. To then find out he was a paedophile and child trafficker can be quite disheartening, to say the least. So was it him who promoted love and I mean, you would promote love of all, wouldn't you? Like the pedophiles nowadays, love everybody, forgive everybody their sins, right? Is he saying, you know, when we judge people, we judge them because we see in them the things that we don't like, right? Do I now think he was salting the fact that, you know, what was going to come back to bite him in the ass? So he wasn't just murdered for sorcery, like, so sorcery, right? Prophesizing, taking drugs, but also being able to, you know, connect to his psychic abilities. So we see telekinesis, we see people moving things, we see you know, manifestation and changing and manipulating time space because you step outside of time space. So what was interesting is he talks about the fact that they communed with the dark, I think it was the dark side of the sphere or something. And I was like, oh, on the moon, that one. He didn't mention the moon, but that's what popped into my head. But this is bad, isn't it? So I do believe in forgiveness and redemption, right? Because I think if you don't, I do believe we have to make sure we're not judging people on today's standards. And so yeah, it's a conundrum, as Matt would say. It is a conundrum. I do believe in love and forgiveness because of what it does to you on a cellular level and what it does for your capacity to heal. Do people make mistakes? Yes. Do I think he hit 30, 40 and decided he was going to try these drugs and start milking these children? No. Do I think it probably happened to him? Yes. Do I think it was part of the cult rituals? Absolutely. So we just have to be more mindful that some of the stuff in the Bible, which is really fucking weird, it's not weird and abstract because they were all doing drugs, they were kids, they were milking these children. So, on that really pleasant note, sorry guys. Oh shit! Look, 3 hours again. I don't mean to be. I do apologise, and I need some food. I've got to be up early in the morning. What did I say we were going to do last? Overwhelm. Was that it? Effortlessly breaking through overwhelm. Okay. So, and I will do this really quickly. One of my most famous, most favorite methodologies for breaking through overwhelm is by using a mind map for whatever it is you're trying to figure out, right? So you usually use mind maps, or they call them spider diagrams. Use a spider diagram, you know, because you're kind of like mapping out a project, right? Oh, actually, let's like show and tell. Literally, I use them all the time. This is my like lined diary journal of what I need to do, and I've obviously gone rogue. I just draw mind maps, right? Okay, so the reason why a mind map is so useful, especially if you're trying to heal. So usually people get overwhelmed because they need to achieve something, and they write a list, a to-do list. And then every time you cross something off, you write something else on. And you have to keep reading the list because it's in no order, right? So your brain doesn't work in an order. If you're not one of the small percentages really high on the spectrum, your brain doesn't work in a linear fashion all the time. When you're thinking about things, you will think about things based on the emotion you're feeling, and then it will just kind of like follow on from that emotion, right? So whether you are trying to figure out, you know, why am I feeling this way, right? So we have to do it from a kind of logical, analytic perspective. Don't ever try to figure out why you feel a certain way if you are like trapped in the emotion, like ever. Because you'll only hear the stuff that's attached with that emotion, and it won't ever be the whole truth, and it's not helpful, it's not useful, and it can re-traumatize you. So we don't want to be re-traumatizing yourself. But also, if you're trying to figure out, like, you know, I need to do XYZ, I've got all of these things I need to do, people will like kind of write a list, and then they'll start the list and then they keep reading it, and it's overwhelming. So don't write lists ever. Use a mind map. And again, it doesn't matter if you got lined paper or you got round paper. Yeah, I mean, you can have round paper if you want, or whether you've got the back of an envelope, right? The amount of stuff I've got back of envelopes, because that's what I've got to hand when my brain's kind of, you know, jumped onto the superhighway, and given me the information that I was looking for. That just, you say it came out of nowhere. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes out of somewhere. And I'm not using drugs, by the way, at all. Can I be one of those people who, I mean, I tried it once when I was 13. It just made me sick. And I was on lots of prescribed medication for many years, and I don't go near prescribed medication because it makes me poorly. I'm that statistic. She'd never done it before. She tried it once and she died, right? I used to drink quite a bit of alcohol. Don't even drink alcohol anymore. So I'm not I'm not using purple when I have my intuitive ideas and thoughts. I'm just jumping onto the highways, right? Because we can do that. You just need to be in the alpha brainwave state, which your brain kind of blips into like all the time anyway, which is why you have those inspirations and you're like, oh, this is the thing I need to do. But the more happy you are, the more you zip into that. So it's just easier. You have more thoughts, right? It doesn't mean you can't when you're unhappy, but it just happens with an increased frequency. So if you've never done a mind map, you literally just write the issue in the. Let's show and tell it. Okay, so this is the mind map for the brainwashing documentary, like the in-depth thing I did. What was it called? Masterclass. So I just wrote brainwashing in the middle, right? So basically, for the first half of the brainwashing masterclass, it was going through how they brainwash, and it was going through specific examples throughout history, breaking down, you know, so like number one is famine, you know, starving you. Number two, and I can't remember the specific order, but number two would be like not allowing you to sleep. So, and you see like all of these methodologies being used to torture, right? Because it's much easier to get information out of somebody if they're compliant. So it's about building compliance, and then you have to build compliance. You have to trust, somebody has to trust you, and then you can kind of layer it on. You can't just like instantly get somebody to just believe everything you say, which is why our families reject us when we try and tell them the truth about what's going on. So you basically just stick the thing, right? This is what I'm focusing on. So you want to focus your conscious and your subconscious mind. And actually, you're also focusing your physical body on it. So this is why it's really beneficial to do it this way. It also, the reason why it's my favorite is it's the only methodology to kind of, to really kind of figure out what's going on that has no difference in gender. So lots of them, maybe girls do better than boys or boys do better than girls. There is no gender issue. But most importantly for people like me, there is no cognitive deficit when somebody has a specific learning disorder. So whether you've got dyscalculia, or dyslexia, and even if you have ADHD or you have any of the other neurological disorders, is it still works, right? Because most of the time, if you have your brain wired differently, and I've mentioned this before, when it's a neurological disorder, it's not that your brain always works differently, and it works differently processing information. So information taken in and out, whether it's input information or output information, is processed differently, consistently, regardless of your emotional state, right? So people who don't have a neurological condition will mimic the same kind of symptoms present in somebody with a neurological condition once you are in an altered emotional state, a negative emotional state. But if your brain works normally when you're feeling good, then you don't have a neurological disorder. But we don't diagnose people properly, and everyone says my ADHD brain. Fuck you, because you don't have it. Just because you can't concentrate on something you don't like doesn't mean you don't have ADHD. Get fucked, back in your box. Sorry, it really pisses me off. Genuinely try having a brain that can be very unhelpful. And people are just going, my ADHD brain. Anyway, what was I saying? With your thing in the middle, right? It's all the same brain region. If you have dyslexia, dyscalculia, ADHD, autism, it's the same brain region. It's like it's the front portion of your brain. It's your processing information. So if somebody can do things for extended periods and stay on a linear thought capacity for extended periods when they feel good, or when it's something that they enjoy, they don't have ADHD. Right? Because it's not my brain doesn't work when I'm having a shitty day. It's my brain just doesn't work in the same way ever. Like it just doesn't. I mean, and sometimes it just doesn't work ever in certain. Why don't they put numbers on watches anymore? Right? Okay, that's. I was trying to get a new watch the other day, and like, I need the numbers. It doesn't matter. I still got to read it with the numbers, but I mean, it gives me a head start, right? I can tell you when it's 12 o'clock. What time? Brainwashing in the middle. Sorry, I do try to. It pops in my head. It comes out. Right, it drives my crackers. So you put the main thing in the middle, whether you are trying to identify. I'll close my eyes, it makes it easier. Whether you're trying to identify an issue, you're trying to fix a problem, you're trying to sort something out, it enables you to focus your attention on it and only it. So this is why it's beneficial for somebody who has brain jumping capacity. Unhelpful brain jumping. Okay, so then you use a color, or you can do dots and dashes, or you can do whatever you want, but it can make it easier, right? So then you use a color, and you just draw like an arrow off. So what I've got here is S1. So this is solution number 1, food as fuel. So basically there were 7 things that were identified as the there's 7 things that they have to do in order to make you compliant, right? So in order to beat the brainwashing, you have to make sure you got these 7 things, like, you know, sorted out, right? So it was just I just reverse engineered it, and then I say I reverse engineered it. I did reverse engineer it, but I used all of the information and research out there based on the people who have beat brainwashing. And there's so many really interesting books. Some people who have been in the prisoner of war camps and they just didn't succumb. So used all that information plus all of the therapeutic techniques and, you know, the stuff that I've done with my clients who were, you know, manipulated, brainwashed and all of that stuff to kind of reverse engineer a really simple strategy using very powerful techniques, but in a way that's beneficial and helpful, right? So step 1 for them is hunger. So step 1 for us is start understanding food as fuel, right? Because even if you only get, so even if they bring ration books back, as long as you know which foods have the right vitamins, minerals, and the components that your body needs to function, it doesn't matter whether you only have a small amount because you're still going to be able to do it. So like a key thing you'd need is like chicken and dairy, right? So why? Because that's like packed full of tryptophan. Tryptophan is the core component in 5-hydroxytryptamine, which is serotonin. You need serotonin because serotonin is the chemical that turns on your immune system. It enables you to heal. When the sun goes down, it is the thing that your pineal gland turns into melatonin, and when you're asleep you can then do like different levels of healing, and it helps you stay asleep, right? So you know, right, okay, well, if I'm allowed 1 chicken breast or 5 kilos of cheese, I'm going to go the 5 kilos of cheese because that's going to sustain my tryptophan for longer. I mean, I'm obviously not going to eat 5 kilos of cheese in one go because that's just dumb. But you can start making conscious decisions about food being fuel for the mind and body rather than just being, you know, something nice to eat, right? And that's what every other species on the planet uses food for. That you don't just be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna, you know. I always felt really bad for my dogs because I was like, oh, it's like the same old shit again. Like they don't care. They'd get a variety though because they get fresh food, so they get like fresh chopped up vegetables. That I make sure they get different ones because it's fuel, right? So I make sure they have a variety of different meats on rotation. So because I know that say for example chicken's really high in tryptophan, and then I know that game meat is really high in certain vitamins and minerals which aren't necessarily there, which is why they get eggs every single day, raw eggs, because they're dogs, they don't need cooked eggs, but because I know of the properties in egg with regards to antiviral, anti-inflammatory, and just, I mean, eggs are just fucking amazing. They're the only thing you can eat, you will be fine. So then I've got, okay, so I've got like 3 bits for food as fuel. Like, how can I break this down? Which techniques can I throw in with that? So then I'd go, okay, so the next thing they're talking about, making you lethargic, like kind of making you weak and fatigued and lethargic, right? Okay, so how do we counter that? Well, you build strength, and so basically you just kind of go round, right? And then you go, okay, so this is like the big bit. Okay, so now I've got the main thing. I've got my 7 main things. Now I want to work backwards. Now I'm going to put 3 things under the 7. Why am I going to put 3 things under the 7? Because that gives you 21, and that's a lot of fucking work and effort for me to create all 21 videos for all of these things that I kind of just gave away for free, right? Like a 4.5-hour masterclass plus 21 in-depth videos plus walks through. Oh, it took me weeks. Anyway, and actually 21, if you just did 1 a day for 21, if you just, they're all really powerful anyway, right? 21's a lot of things. It's definitely enough. So, but so if you're kind of like doing a Say if you're trying to figure out, so I always taught it in therapy, right? And I always taught it with regards to figuring out what's going on in your mind, so you can kind of reverse engineer it and figure it out what technique you should be using, right? That's how I kind of taught my clients to use it, right? Say, for example, you've got a negative thought, right? CBT will teach you to kind of categorize it and then analyze it and then let it go. It doesn't work, which is why CBT doesn't work. Anyway, so what I would teach them to do is to, grab a thought, right? And then you stick it in the middle. So say your thought, I find it really difficult to do these examples of negative thoughts because I don't have them very often. Still a common one. I'm worried about money. Now we have to be careful what we say out loud because we manifest it. So I'm not worried about money, but let's just do this one, right? So I'm worried about money. That's one that I used to have, right? So that was kind of easier to pull forward. So you stick like I'm worried about money in the middle. And then you might put reasons why you're worried about money around the outside. So you might put, food prices have gone up, and you might follow that thread, prices. So food prices have gone up, gas prices have gone up, or petrol prices, or diesel prices, or electricity if you're plugging your car in. I need my car for work. If I don't work, you're tracking it back. If I don't work, I can't earn the money. I have kids. Okay, so then you might go to another thread, right? So you might be like, okay, well, I'm worried about kids here, but actually I'm worried a lot more than just kids over there. So I'm going to do kids as a separate one because I think that could be a big thing. So you might put kids as a separate one. You say, well, what are you worried about money with your kids? Well, I'm worried that they're going to grow up with a negative mindset with regards to abundance, right? So I'm going to train into them that they can't have everything that they want because things are tight right now. I'm worried that they will go to school and they will get picked on because they don't have the things that everybody else has. I'm worried that then my child will be bullied. I'm worried that then my child will grow up to resent me and we won't have a good relationship, right? So you can go. And then you're like, okay, I'm worried about money. And you see that instantly, that worried about money thing turns it. And if you follow those threads like far enough, they usually end up with the root. It is like a few root issues, right? That you will then see that same pattern of behavior throughout your life. So you might follow it back and it's like you're abandoned by your children. And maybe your dad left when you were in puberty, right? Because and puberty is important with regards to abandonment issues. And if they died, it's different, right? So it's worse if you're a guy, and it's fascinating research. So maybe you then found that you keep repeating this pattern by you never realized why you kept you fell in love with somebody, you had a really good relationship, and all of a sudden you sabotage it, right? Why are you're recreating this abandonment cycle because you have a deep-rooted belief that I will always be abandoned. So you don't have to do that to figure it out, right? I prefer an easier way where you just go, what actual shit's showing up in my life and what's the common thread, and then you can figure it out. You can like deal with it, overturn it, move on, and then the life as you move forward will throw you stuff. But if you're really trying to, if you can't figure it out, maybe you've got lots of shit going on, right? So it's a lot easier for me to kind of see the patterns that need healing because my life's mostly good with a few shitstorms. It's quite a raw one at the moment. So it's easier for me to isolate the things than it was back when I was in the thick of it. So that's why it can be really handy. But you have to be really careful. You don't want to just do that and then leave it hanging. You have to make sure you got all the other techniques, that you're going to clear through it, you're going to let go of it, you're going to understand it, you're going to figure it out, you're going to work out what the gift is in that negative experience. And I know that sounds really insane, but one of the gifts in me being abused is I can have empathy with my clients who've been in the same position. But I get it. I understand it. And I don't understand it from it sounds horrific, right? So if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be able to be the non-judgmental person I am. And when they tell me they've done horrific things, I'm like, yep, shit happens when you're in a shit state, right? So all the horrible things that I did, right? So if I hadn't have done those things and I hadn't experienced those things, I wouldn't be in the same. I would not be as effective at helping people heal themselves, because I don't heal anyone. I wouldn't be as effective at helping people heal themselves because I wouldn't be able to sit without judgment and then also tell them to man the fuck up and do the work, right? Because I'm coming from a place of just do the fucking work, love, and you'll be fine. Because I did it by myself. And you've got me in your corner, right? That's what I guilt trip them. Anyway, so even when you have really horrible experiences, like they've shaped you into the you are today. Like if you had a time machine, you should never go back and erase your horrible experiences. And anyway, they will come at some point because you've made a contract to experience them. So you might as well do what I did and get it all done by the time you're 21. I say the majority of it done, but we still have to experience things and grow and learn and experience. So hopefully that last kind of that little, hopefully you're enjoying, I mean, there's a few of you on and you've been on for a while, or you've just kind of like fallen asleep. Who knows? I don't mind. So I do apologize. It has been a very interesting show for me as well. I love exploring these things and getting the opportunity. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share things with you and hopefully give you a very different insight to things that are going on. And potentially, Jesus was a long time ago. He's not going on right now. But hopefully you're kind of finding the random offshoots of information beneficial. I do always try to finish with something that you can do to help you heal. For free, because I do recognize that money is a very big issue for people, right? I mean, I do try to make the Happiness Hacks Lab as cheap as possible, but I do understand that for some people, even like $5 is not something you have. I've been in that position, and it doesn't mean that you don't deserve an opportunity to heal, because if you're here, then you're on the side of good, because otherwise you wouldn't be listening to me ramble on for 3 hours and 13 minutes. So next week, I hope the world doesn't become more insane, because otherwise I need to go eat. So thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see some kind of good stuff. I've heard that it's not going to start getting good until we hit August or September. So I think we've got lots more shit to happen. Pray for everybody who is struggling. Pray for all the people who are caught in any kind of potential pretend natural disasters, whether it's Texas, whether it's all the stuff that's going on around the globe that's not getting spoken about, like the non-stop earthquakes and flash floods in other places that's happening as well. Praying and sending love and forgiveness and joy into the ether, like it's huge, right? Even if you don't believe or you haven't seen the psychology research stuff yet, like it's huge. It makes a huge difference. Like that's if you are trapped in your own mind and you're worried that you can't do anything to help, right? You moving into a place of love and feeding, like the happier you are, the happier your atoms are, the happier your energy is feeding into earth. Like that's the way we, like I've been saying it for 5 years, that's the way we win, because we change. Like quantum physics and entangle is just phenomenal, and people aren't using it properly. So just send love, right? Whenever you get an opportunity, like, send love to whomever you feel deserves it. And the way that I do it is I just say send love to everybody, and I just be like, that's it, right? I'm not going to stick any caveats on it, because, like, if I send it to everybody, and I know that if it's a bad person that receives it, maybe that's their tipping point, right? Out of the brainwashing, out of into the realization of all this shit they've done, right? That's the way that you stop the bad people, is by pulling them out of the patterns they're in. And we do that by manipulating their emotional states in the background without them realizing, like they're doing to us, right? Like, nice psychology. We're sending love. We're not sending hate. We're not doing curses. So thank you very much for joining me. Have yourselves an amazing week. I shall see you next week. Loads and loads of love. See you soon. Bye for now.